when successful.
Good morning, everyone. It's a little bit different having a budget meeting this time of year during the day. So at this time, I'd like to do a call the meeting to order and have a roll call vote, please.
Chair Frieden?
Aye.
Chair Moore?
Here.
Mayor Frieden?
I'm here.
Councilor Ross?
Here.
Board members Smith? Board member Conley? Here. Board member Blum? Here. Board member Cobb? Here. Board member Letts? Here.
Okay. At this time, I'd like to ask if anyone connected to the meeting who is not on the budget committee or staff to mute their microphones and turn off their videos, please. This time we'll call for an election of the chair. Do I hear a motion for someone to be a chair?
I move to nominate Dave Moyer as chair.
Second.
Third.
Fourth.
It sounds like you got a vote already. So, okay.
Conspired in your absence.
Dave, do you have to head out at noon?
I have an appointment at noon for a half hour. So,
Okay.
So I guess I should call for a vote on the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Do we want a pro tem or a?
So if the budget meeting is done before Dave has to leave, we're fine, we'll have to re-elect a different chair for the URA because we will not be present. So it's up to you if you would like to do that.
I think that's okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I guess we got a chair. So I guess the motion passed.
Yes.
Okay. Next, we'll go to the city manager for a budget message.
Well, thanks, Chair Moyer, and good morning, Budget Committee. Thanks for your time and energy and civic commitment to being involved and engaged with this process. This obviously is an important step as it relates to city operations and investments next year. So thanks for the time you put in, and thanks for the time you're going to put in today and potentially tomorrow as well. I'm thinking through how to approach the budget message today in terms of the presentation. I'm going to do a little bit of a different approach. I'm usually kind of ad lib and off the cuff, and I don't see any reason why not to just stick to the script, because it really is probably the most succinct and effective way to get across kind of the overall themes as it relates to our thought process and various constraints and opportunities that went into preparing this budget. So I'm actually just gonna read the budget message, make sure that sinks in. We can stop at the goals and some of the proposed budget allocations and address some questions there, but later in the agenda, we'll be diving into each fund and department. So there'll be opportunities to do more Q&A at that point. So I'm gonna dive in, and then again, if you have questions, stop me. I'll pause a little bit along the way, but hopefully take just a little more than 5 minutes to get through this.
What page?
We're on page 4.
That seemed like. I can't
Roman
remember which
numerals.
Yeah, they're all Roman numeral 4.
Roman numeral 4, yes.
So it's gonna be
Roman numeral 4, page 1.
it's in the introduction section, and it's the 6th page. Yeah, no problem. And it's the page titled budget message at the top.
In blue.
Correct. So with this letter is presented a balanced budget for next fiscal year, 2022-2023, starting July 1 through June 30, 2023. This budget contains a measured and proactive approach to addressing key community priorities while keeping core city services and essential infrastructure at the forefront. While the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic left its mark, the resiliency of the Sisters community was on full display, and we have much to be thankful for moving forward. Record growth and visitation continue as people seek refuge in smaller rural areas and our natural environment, while technology has enabled remote work to transform our economy with where we live and work. Preserving our small town feel, community character, and livability have long been cherished values, and that overarching theme was memorialized in the Sisters Country Vision in 2018, and more recently in the Sisters Comprehensive Plan update in 2021. The need for community involvement, careful planning, strategic investments, and steady leadership to manage growth has never been greater. Fortunately, we have been doing just that for many years and are in excellent position to mitigate challenges, expand opportunities, and make this special place even better. We anticipated that Sisters, given its overall desirability and strong foundation of local government entities, nonprofits, and businesses, would be well positioned to bounce back as well as any small rural community could, and largely that has been the case. Due to economic uncertainty on the horizon with the pandemic, the budgets for the last couple of years took the middle road between being overly ambitious or conservative. Today, for different reasons, we continue to see uncertain times ahead due to rapidly rising inflation and supply chain issues, both of which have impacted some city projects in the past year. Staff took a careful approach in this proposal. Growth, increased visitation, and mindful management of resources and expenses, the city's budget has steadily increased as the trend continued in this current fiscal year, FY 2021-22, of most revenue projections being exceeded. This proposed budget for fiscal year 22-23, total balanced budget is $24,959,475. And for perspective, just 3 years ago, the city's total budget was under $20 million. The city has operated on leaner staffing levels for many years. That is a noteworthy accomplishment, allowing additional funds to be invested or reserved for capital outlay projects. However, as we all know, the city is busier than ever, and investing in human capital to manage short and long-range projects is essential. This budget adds one full-time equivalent employee to the city staff to support engineering, project management, and development review in the Public Works Department. Last year, 2 full-time equivalent employees were added, first an assistant planner position to support short and long-range planning, and the second was allocated for a position to oversee parks planning and public event policy administration. The latter position funds were shifted based on priority needs in winter 2022 to instead hire the city's first full-time code compliance officer. The city should continue to consider the addition of targeted positions in the coming years, depending on the trajectory of growth and number and complexity of projects. Largely due to the pandemic, there have been many layers of federal financial assistance to states, counties, and cities. The American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 provided several $1 trillion in stimulus to aid in recovery from the pandemic. The state received a couple billion. Deschutes County received approximately $38 million, and the City of Sisters, $618,000. These funds were received in 2 installments or tranches, half last summer, and the second half will be coming this summer. The city utilized the first half to complete some ongoing and previously planned projects, the Locust Sewer Line relocation under Whitechoose Creek, and also to make an investment in installing a large solar panel array at the wastewater treatment plant. These projects were previously planned and had immediate impact to the entire community. The city will be evaluating opportunities to use the second half of the ARPA funds this fiscal year, and there are significant federal requirements to adhere to, including using the funds by December 2026. This budget reflects those funds in reserve for future expenditures, but does not contemplate the expenditure of the funds. So when those decisions are made, a supplemental budget will have to be done. The city requested and secured $500,000 of county ARPA dollars this last fall to support development of a multifamily workforce housing rental project. The location and developer of the project is not yet determined, and given the constraints on land supply and costs, there are several challenges. Ideally, these funds will be allocated this budget year and may or may not flow through the city budget. The funds are in reserve at the county and are not reflected in this proposed budget for those reasons. The 4 cities in Deschutes County and the county supported passage through the state legislation this last short session of House Bill 4123 to fund and create a joint office on houselessness to improve coordination of service providers. The city is continuing to support this topic through dedicated staff and council time to learn, collaborate, and identify measured approaches to assisting those that are houseless in Sisters Country. This proposed budget is based upon the council goal setting process that took place in February 2022. And furthermore, the overarching themes, the overarching categories of goals were established by the city council in the winter of 2021. And we've used 2 budget cycles, the current budget cycle and this proposed budget cycle, to implement objectives and key projects to move further towards those goals. Within all those categories, again, various projects and initiatives, as well as strategic timing, were vetted and prioritized with support from city's management team. Those goals were adopted in March, on March 9th, just a few months ago. So the rest of the budget message really just provides a snapshot of key investments for this upcoming fiscal year. And definitely invite the public and anyone interested during this process, but also just through all of next year to dig deeper into the document, but also reach out to staff, of course, if there are any questions to learn more about these projects. So I'm going to skip slightly ahead through the description of the goal categories to the goal categories themselves, and just briefly run through these categories. And if there are any questions, we can take some then. But like I said earlier, when we revisit the specific funds and departments, we can dive deeper into some of those projects and amounts. So I can't say the page number, but at the bottom of the page that talks about livability and growth, the city's invested significant resources in completely updating the comprehensive plan in 2021 for the first time since 2005 to reflect community needs and best position ourselves to manage growth. Building on that, the city is currently evaluating efficiency measures to accommodate growth within the existing urban growth boundary, as well as our housing plan from 2010 to keep pace with an expanding affordable housing need in the community. Based on those projects and other factors, the city will soon need to reevaluate the buildable lands inventory and a potential UGB expansion. So to supplement some of those projects or build off some of those projects, these are some key investments that we have put in this proposed budget. $65,000 in contracted services to start the evaluation, likely at the beginning of 2023, in the winter of 2023, of looking at an urban growth boundary amendment. And then that process would roll into the following fiscal year, very likely, and need some additional funds that year. So $40,000 to, again, finalize the Parks Master Plan update, capital improvement plan, and system development charge update, and that'll roll into the fall of this fiscal year. And you'll see that in several of the master plan projects we have going that, again, we have a good start on, and we're maybe approaching the middle of those projects, but we'll be working on them through summer and through most of fall into early winter. $40,000 to implement code changes from the buildable land efficiency measures evaluation, $30,000 to implement recommendations from the 2022 housing plan update, and $15,000 to implement code changes to the city's outdoor lighting ordinance and outreach. Yeah, please.
This is related, but not related. If board members have found a typo, do you want them just to, on a piece of paper, note them for corrections for their next iteration?
Yeah, good point. So as I don't want to steal Joe's thunder, but there are some Easter eggs in there in terms of typos or things that may not be spot on. Yeah, just circle them, note them on the side. You can hand them to myself or Joe, and we'll make those corrections as we move forward with the final budget book for sure. Perfect. Okay. No, and we appreciate that. I mean, that's part of this process. So, any questions on projects or those proposed funds? Yes.
Yeah, I think it would be important to also consider raising or allowing the council members to be paid. And so at some future point, we should look at that. Because the reasoning is, I'm a retired person, so it's easy for me to take on as a candidate and then as a person who's elected a position, and I don't have other obligations. But it's really important to get some younger people in here on the board. But they have, as you mentioned the other day, they have to be taking care of a child. They have to give the child, childcare, and then they're coming here, as a volunteer. So I just think the city needs to just think about that, look into that, and perhaps figure out a way to compensate the counselors.
That is something that I spoke with Corey about last week too, and it will come up under other business tomorrow for council to look at and either move it forward or not. just to open the dialogue.
I think that's a good distinction, or, that's a topic that can frame a distinction that I want to make for all of us to keep in mind as we move through this budget, which is, in my perspective and recommendation, that's first a policy discussion and decision that needs to be made, followed by a budget discussion and decision that needs to be made. And so one of the things we don't want to do in this proposed budget is do too much of, hey, we might do that, but first we have to have a conversation. So let's try to imagine a number and put it in there. Let's start with the policy discussion, and then as we do throughout the year, we can make changes to the budget through supplemental budget processes. So, if council decides to do something like that down the road, we have the funds to do it, but let's not try to guess what that number might be now.
I wasn't suggesting.
Understood.
Yeah.
So the next goal area is wildfire mitigation and community resiliency. Sisters Country, as we all know, has a long history of wildland fire being both regular and important to our natural ecosystem. Most recently, the prevalence of large wildfires has increased in frequency and severity. Most notably, the Pole Creek Fire and Millie Fire each exceeded 24,000 acres, while they have been dozens of other wildfires in the past couple of decades. City has but must further collaborate with federal, state, county, and special district partners, among others, to manage our safety both around and within our city limits. In 2018, the city worked through the Community Planning Assistance for Wildfire Program to reduce wildfire risks through improved land use planning. And there's some recommendations there that haven't been implemented yet. In 2019, the city was a partner in updating the Greater Sisters Country Community Wildfire Protection Plan. And in 2021, the city was a key partner in updating the Deschutes County Natural Hazard Mitigation Plan. And as well as adopting many of the recommendations from all these plans into the 2021 comprehensive plan. And then this year, the city completed its first ever wildfire risk assessment and mitigation plan for our critical infrastructure. So a couple things here. The city's role in kind of managing wildfire, over the years, it hasn't been something that we particularly had a direct influence on. But that has drastically changed in the last handful of years. And we've taken some steps with planning efforts. We've also been waiting for the state and other partners to potentially provide some clarity for us to take action. But the council has reaffirmed this as a goal, and we've rolled some funds that we set aside this last year, $50,000 to the Urban Renewal Agency to create a downtown commercial building renovation and fire hardening assistance program. So we'll need to work with the State Fire Marshal's office and other professionals who are experts in that field to help us determine criteria and help get the most bang for the buck for making those investments. But rolling those funds into this fiscal year was important. $20,000 are set aside to implement some of the water and wastewater system wildfire mitigation recommendations. And then it's not directly quantified, but I did want to make note of staff time having been dedicated to lead additional coordination efforts, evaluate development and municipal code opportunities and changes, monitor grants, and then further build these partnerships to conduct outreach and enforcement as it relates to wildfire mitigation and defensible space. So any questions on any of those allocations or projects?
I just want to say one thing. I know we don't have a lot of policy on this because it's A, a new area, and B, it's hard to determine where we can effectively spend funds. But I look at the URA number of 50,000 to harden downtown, and it seems really small. Doesn't mean we have to change anything, but I think in the future, when we start talking policy and we get into this topic more over the next few years, that number is probably going to rise by quite a bit. Or at least total numbers in this category are going to continue to rise as we get more control over our local area and do more coordination with other agencies. So,
yeah, a couple things. We can talk a little more about that when we get to the urban renewal proposed budget. And then it's pretty fitting that I said, the whole policy discussion and decision, and then budget discussion and decision, and then totally contradicted myself because that's exactly what we did last year with that. Is we said, hey, let's throw some money out there, and then we'll try to figure out how and what we're going to do with it.
Right.
So there are certain cases, where I think that is where we all decided that that's called for. And to your point, we don't really know how far $50,000 will go. Will that help one building? Will it help 5? Is it a matching grant? We haven't decided and determined that policy and program.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of work to be done on that, and that sort of dovetails with that third bullet of dedicating staff time and working with partnerships as well. That whole theme of being able to figure out what exactly does that mean, and then how much do we really need, and what opportunities are out there to leverage those funds.
Okay, thank you.
Good points.
It's also just to spin off on that. It's also a matter of fund balance too. I mean, project fund has had a lot of expenditures with East Portal, to name one of them. So, we're going to pursue debt, but there's only so much left in that fund balance until we transfer it in there. So that's another reason I think for that.
And just to be clear, you're talking about the URA.
Yeah.
Just to make sure.
Yeah.
Everybody knows. Yeah.
Oh yeah, everything. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So the next category, and again, we can dive deeper into this stuff later as we go through the book and the different funds and departments, but economic development. So the city's transient lodging tax is a significant revenue source for the general fund and a key funding source for supporting our tourism economy. Approximately 33% of those funds are restricted to tourism promotion, facilities, and related activities. Historically, the city has given all those restricted TLT funds to the Sisters Area Chamber of Commerce to market the community. Over the past year, and really further than that back, but it's picked up in the last year, the city has invested in research, outreach, and development of a new nonprofit to serve as the organization receiving TLT, to broaden beyond just promotion and to include tourism development, strategic partnerships, and stewardship. We've seen an unprecedented rise in visitation over the past 2 years, while residential growth continues at a strong pace. It's a pivotal time now to make this transition and ensure that we maintain a vibrant tourism economy while balancing our character, quality of life, and natural resources. Pivoting a little bit, the city entered an MOU in the fall of 2021 with EDCO to provide part-time support and resources focused on trade and sector businesses. Prior to that, the city had a full-time contract with EDCO for the Sisters Country Economic Development Director in the program. For several reasons, the city did not continue the full-time contract when Cappy Lewis, former SCED director, took a new position. The city is currently planning to discuss in early FY 22-23 whether to stay part-time or re-enter the full-time amount. So based on those very brief summarizations of big topics and programs, what we've put in this proposed budget is $450,000 for a first ever contract with the new Sisters Destination Management Organization. That organization is anticipated to be fully operational later this summer, and then have a executive director on board in the fall, ideally in October. And that $450,000 is comprised of a $100,000 one-time startup grant from past restricted tourism reserves, as well as $350,000 of annual appropriations of collected TLT as we move through this fiscal year, remitted monthly. $65,000 and $25,025 for a contract extension with the Sisters Area Chamber of Commerce for tourism promotion and visitor center operations through October 31st, 2022. That's to bridge the gap between the existing relationship and past relationship with the chamber, and shifting to the new organization, making sure that there isn't a gap between those two operations. $45,000 is budgeted for consideration of reconstituting a full-time contract with EDCO in the fall of 2022, and that would be approximately 3/4 of the year's annual cost. And again, that's a council decision for later in the summer and early fall. $30,000 to refine conceptual master plan options at the Woodland open space property for a recreational amenity that benefits both residents and visitors. And then finally, $20,000 through the community grant program that the city has conducted for quite some time to support nonprofit and for-profit organizations benefiting essential needs in the community. Also, I didn't really note this, but many of these projects touch many of these goals, so they don't just fit perfectly under one of these goals. It's a little bit art and a little bit science, and just of where to kind of put them. So don't overthink that too much. Any questions on any of the economic development objectives, projects, proposed amounts? No?
I'm just curious, is the Sisters Destination Management Organization, is it going to include members from the chamber as far as on the board of it?
So currently, it's not slated to include a representative from the chamber, but that'll really ultimately be up to that board of the new organization. So the council will give direction for city attorney and staff to file articles of incorporation and with the state and actually create the nonprofit entity and make an appointment of initial board members. But then the board itself will be completely independent, and they'll be able to decide whether to go out and do a recruitment to expand the board to 7 or expand the board to 9 or add certain people from different organizations or perspectives in the community.
So city has oversight of that group as far as?
So similar to the way it's been in the past, the oversight will be through a contract. And the contract will be that $450,000 that's allocated. And within that, there can be terms and conditions, requirements for reporting or, audit rights and transparency and things like that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So essential infrastructure, that's obviously the backbone of all the activity that occurs within the city. Our water, wastewater, streets, and parks enables residents, schools, businesses, tourists, and everything else going on in the community to flourish. Council has continued, and we appreciate their continued prioritization of these necessary investments in these systems to ensure stability against unforeseen issues and also help address the steady growth that we've seen for quite some time. With that increasing growth in Sisters in Central Oregon, traffic on US 20 has been an issue, obviously, and we know that in the summer in particular, it can reach gridlock levels. The city continues to push the locust and US 20 roundabout forward and is hopeful that the work of design and property acquisition in previous years has positioned the city very well to acquire the bulk of project funding soon and is optimistic for construction in 2024. Furthermore, we need to prepare for completion of that project and the need for improvement on Barkley Drive between the 2 US 20 roundabouts for completing that alternate route and truck route. That's a system, it's not just 2 intersections. And the cost of, just more broadly, the cost of construction projects due to inflation has risen dramatically in the past year, and staff's recommending delaying some non-essential capital investments for future budgets.
Corey, can I ask, is the hope there that costs will stabilize or go down?
To some extent, yeah, it's a combination of hoping that those costs may go down, and also that we can strategize on the funding package side of things. So you can gain efficiencies if you're bringing one contractor in to do multiple projects, you're not paying 3 mobilization costs. So it's partly aligning how the contracts and projects are bid to be able to maximize value, as well as what resources are we putting together, potentially outside funds, grant funds as well. And then those 2 things plus a little hope brings us to the point of saying, if it can wait a year or 2, let's strategize.
Got it.
With that said, there still are a lot of investments in this budget around essential infrastructure. So we just do a rough addition of different investments of different sizes and come up with this kind of total number. So over $735,000 of capital investment and design efforts in water, wastewater, and streets systems financed by SDCs, operating funds, and reserves above and beyond what's listed below. $200,000 for engineering design of the wastewater west side pump station. $100,000 for engineering design for Barkley Drive improvements, again connecting Barkley and US 20 roundabout and the Locust US 20 roundabout for the alternate route, truck route. $100,000 to complete a master plan for the future mobility hub on the East Portal property. $80,000 for engineering and design for well 1 improvements. $65,000 to complete the water and wastewater master plan updates, including capital improvement plans and system development charge updates. $30,000 to continue to implement the priority projects from the traffic safety audit, and $5,000 to complete the new water right permit for well number 4. So a lot of planning efforts, a lot of putting ourselves in the right position. And to the extent we've done a good job keeping up with growth and keeping up with costs, we're also at a really critical juncture with those water and wastewater master plan updates as it relates to the formulas and factors that dictate how much we're collecting to try to help growth pay for growth. So that's not something that, we have inflationary escalators that we've done over the last several years, but we've also seen the needs for capital improvement projects change. And so that's going to filter and factor all the way into the calculation for those numbers. So really critical discussion and valuations and decisions coming up in the next 6 months for that kind of stuff.
And real quick, I wanted to thank past budget committee members and some current that have continued to invest in infrastructure as a whole, but especially on the roundabout. The roundabout, when we started this process back in 2018, was at least a 10-year process, and it looks like we're going to get it done hopefully in 5, I don't know. But we just appreciate the long-term investment in that, and just wanted to thank the budget committee members, especially past, for continuing that investment, because that's going to pay off. And go ahead.
No, and that's a great point. And with the Locust 20 roundabout, as we've seen in the last couple budget cycles as well, we haven't exactly set a dollar amount aside because there's some fluidity in the partnership with ODOT and understanding exactly how much local contribution we'll have to make. So we have funds set aside both within city funds, street fund, SDC fund, but also in the Urban Renewal Agency. But in terms of exactly how much we need to appropriate and expend for our local contribution, we don't know that yet. So again, they're there in reserve, and when the time comes to act, we can supplemental budget and execute accordingly. So good governance is definitely a pillar of public trust in government and essential to maintaining a healthy democracy. These major characteristics comprise sustaining good governance: transparency, accountability, inclusivity, being effective and efficient, adhering to our policies, and taking care of our existing assets. These are not achieved and then placed on the mantle. We have to continue to invest in those and be mindful of those. At the same time, much of the work along these fronts comes through our everyday actions, our culture, our attitude, our awareness, and our procedures. Efficient and effective management of all city logistics is also crucial for sustaining other areas of good governance, including finance, technology, and human resources. So a handful of projects in this category: $55,000 for upgrades and maintenance on City Hall, Public Works headquarters, and the First Street building. That's the building currently occupied by the Chamber of Commerce. $20,000 for refinement of the accounting system via online accessibility and a server upgrade. $10,000 for continuation to support professional development opportunities for staff, making sure we're investing and retaining and allowing employees to grow. $7,000 for targeted community outreach and recognition of city volunteers. $5,000 to continue to support the VIT, partnering with Citizens for Community for the first time instead of COIC, Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council. $5,000 for website updates, which includes some ADA compliance, just overall functionality and inclusivity, and $5,000 for legal time, this is sort of a placeholder for if we identify targeted municipal code updates that need refinement, we can operationalize those funds.
How do you update for ADA compliance? I thought about that one, and
So we've already done some of that work, but it's mostly going to be for the visually and the audio impaired. And I don't have the answer for how exactly you do that. Working with website developers and they understand both maybe the rules as well as the best ways to make those changes to the website. So we'll be refining some of that. I mean, some of it also is just the translatability of some of our pieces of the website. PDFs that are uploaded are not able to be translated, but everything else on the website on the bottom of the website is able to be translated in real time. So we need to have a little more discussion on what exactly that means, but we wanted to set some funds aside to make sure that we could do some of those changes.
thank you.
On the professional development, do you feel 10,000 is adequate. I imagine that there hasn't probably been a lot of that last few years with COVID restrictions. So, yeah, I just don't know what the temperature is in the organization, if people need to be catching up on trainings and professional development, or if that's kind of, and also I imagine some of this has gone, instead of a lot of in-person stuff, I imagine a lot more opportunities to, do online training. So I was just curious if that was an adequate amount of money.
Yeah, no, good question. Some of the certifications and things that employees do are required, or through the state, like water, wastewater distribution collections, those types of certifications. So I wouldn't put that necessarily in this category of funding. So we have other areas that contribute to some of those costs. But yeah, in terms of online opportunities, conferences, additional certifications, classes through COCC, there's a wide range of things that we've had employees do in the last few years. And that number is, again, kind of a placeholder, but we do think it is sufficient for this upcoming year. And I wouldn't say that there's pent up demand or need for that. We have had several employees take advantage of opportunities along those lines, even during COVID. It just hasn't been in person, like you said.
Well, I kind of want to echo what Jennifer said. I looked at that number, thought it might be a little low as well. I think that the most important thing we can do for line staff in an organization is provide them with the opportunity to have not only whatever training they need, but also the opportunity to get, be able to advance in certifications or be able even to advance within positions due to the opportunity to go out and have some training. So that might be something to look at as we move along. And again, there is the ability to move some money in there without a supplemental budget because it would not be a lot. But I would echo that I think that's a little low.
And real quick, I think that it's pretty apparent that you'd have significant support from the city council if you decided to expand that number or expand that program a little bit if there was a need for the capacity.
For sure. Yeah, I think staff appreciates that and is aware of that. And it's a balance of encouraging opportunities and not necessarily forcing opportunities, and also balancing all of that with just the work that we have to do on a daily basis. So yeah, it's an ongoing conversation for sure.
So I have a curious mind. So I just was wondering, on the accounting system online accessibility server upgrade, does that include security upgrades, and or does it include backup energy in case we lose our electricity?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. I'm over here.
Thank you.
Sorry, I've got the screen. I don't mean to interrupt the discussion, but the bigger the spreadsheet, the bigger the screen. So I'll try to peer over this as best I can. So we have continuously been making updates to our server. One of the best ways to maintain security is to maintain the batches and the updates and things like that. This is more kind of what you're talking about in terms of resiliency. Would it help us to have a remote server instead of one in-house? Because we do need to have a server upgrade regardless. But it is backed up off-site. So in terms of functionality, if we were to get impacted in some way, shape, or form in this building, we would still be okay. It would just kind of, if we had a physical server here, it would slow down our ability to kind of reset a little bit. But for security and all those things, we do quite a bit to maintain that as best we can.
Thank you.
So the final goal category is environmental sustainability. It's impossible to visit or live in Sisters and not be in awe of the natural beauty that we have here, whether the mountains on the horizon, forests surrounding within the city, abundant wildlife, or White Creek flowing through our open spaces. We're part of this ecosystem and we must do our part to maintain it. The city has longstanding partnerships with organizations such as the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council, including the 2009 White Creek Restoration and Management Plan, and various initiatives such as the ongoing efforts that we hope to have concluded at the end of the summer of 2022 at Creekside Park. The city's received Tree City USA recognition for 15 years and maintains an active urban forestry board. And very importantly, the 2021 comprehensive plan update added for the first time policies around climate change, energy efficiency, and environmental sustainability. So the city will continue to look for new ways to invest in supporting environmental sustainability across departments at the community level and our various impacts. So some projects along the lines are $25,000 to retrofit the First Street Park splash pad with a recirculating water system, $20,000 to continue to support the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council and finalizing the Creekside Park restoration along Whitechoose Creek, $16,000 to develop an environmental sustainability plan for operations, facilities, and fleet, $10,000 to continue priority energy efficiency upgrades for city-owned facilities, and $10,000 to continue priority irrigation, water conservation improvements at city parks, and also $10,000 to implement water conservation year-round priorities for system users. So one of the themes you saw to some extent with the wildfire mitigation and community resiliency, as well as the environmental sustainability goals, those were both, for the most part, first-time goals in winter of 2021. And so one of the things that we did this year, and then also are planning to do next year, is really make sure that we are leading by example with our own facilities and our own property and our own practices. And then in future years, to the extent that council and other committees see fit, can expand and broaden some of those policies or projects to include other components of the community, businesses, development, system users, et cetera. So if you haven't picked up on that theme, that's intentional. We want to make sure that we're walking our own talk first, and we can really control that. We can have a pretty direct impact on that sooner than later. So any questions on that goal category?
Just a quick one. And it may be more appropriate when we get to that area, but given the concern in Sisters Country about wells going dry and all these other sorts of things, and water conservation, et cetera, some of these things that are listed on here, in particular the recirculation system, water conservation, do you have a sense, Paul, how much water a year we would save if we recirculate the splash pad?
I think in the grand scheme of things, with us pumping about 280 million gallons a year, it's very small percentage, but when you start adding that up with the irrigation improvements, with the reduction in turf, we're looking at it over time, over years of getting a percentage of, trying to get 20-30% reduction.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, to wrap up this section, and appreciate your patience and understanding, kind of going through and putting some sideboards on the budget with this approach. This proposed 22-23 fiscal year budget does make significant and strategic investments in council goals and community priorities while balancing our essential services. Sisters long been a desirable destination, has become even more so with the shift in remote working, with little to no signs of slowing. Fortunately, the city did an excellent job last decade keeping up with demand for services and not falling behind on essential infrastructure. We have a diverse and healthy array of resources and have been diligent in accumulating thoughtful reserves for the respected services. As growth continues and the Sisters Country vision encourages us to thoughtfully add amenities, we must evaluate every tool in the toolbox and leverage those with partnerships to sustain this special place. I'm going to skip 2 paragraphs. It's kind of restating some of the stuff we hit at the beginning. Our greatest assets continue to be our people and our natural resources, from the city council to the committees to public service of every volunteer. We all contribute to our collective success. The city staff is thoughtful, passionate professionals, and they really take seriously their work in serving this community. Our team is both effective and efficient, considering stewardship of public tax dollars. The hard work that they and we all put in under the challenges of the past couple of years was presented with the pandemic and growth, while juggling numerous projects, is truly inspiring and noteworthy. I'm very proud of the work that we've all done together. The future of Sisters is ours to shape. Our diversity of opinions, backgrounds, and expertise strengthens the community dialogue in Sisters, while we all value where we do live and work and play. We must continue to channel that in a productive, problem-solving fashion. We're fortunate to call this place home, and we need to be smart stewards while maintaining a welcoming and vibrant atmosphere. I'm confident that this proposed budget moves us further along the path of the council goals and community priorities to sustain and elevate Sisters as a truly remarkable place. That's it for the budget message and overview.
Well done.
Yeah, well done. I was about to say the same thing.
It was a good read, actually. Much better than last year.
Thank you, Corey, for your update on all this stuff. And so at this time, I will ask Carrie if there's any public comment.
Received no public comment.
No public comment? Okay. Thank you. Next, we'll go to the budget presentation by Director O'Neill. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Yes, thank you so much for being here, everybody. So as we go through the book, we're going to touch on a lot of the things that Corey just talked about. But before we get started here, I'd just like to thank staff for all the assistance and work that they did for this budget. Obviously, you know, Corey put a lot of time, effort, and energy into that budget message. Very well done, and encompassed all of our annual goals and work plan items. Just for staff here, Kim Keaton's here. She's our staff accountant. She did a lot of work in just the overall allocation worksheets for a lot of our expenses. It's a lot of nitty-gritty numbers that were in here. Paul, of course, as you all know, he's got over 10, I think, departments and funds that he controls. So his oversight on a lot of these numbers is crucial and critical. He's got a lot of time in this above and beyond his regularly scheduled duties. So appreciate that. Scott as well. I think this was his first foray in putting together a department work plan and such. So appreciate that. And then Carrie and Julie for getting the book together, designing cover and everything, all the amenities here at the meeting. So thanks to all of you. You know, I'm just here to put all the numbers together. You know, that's my main role, and articulate a few things. But this is all our and your budget together. So I think in terms of process, if this works for you, we'll kind of follow along the same outline as prior years. We'll go through some personal services, major revenue sources, major expenditure sources, and then go, you know, start with the general fund and work down and refer back to some of those major items that we'll talk about. So does that work for everybody? Obviously, please feel free to interrupt with any questions you might have or interject with any comments. Oh, I'm sorry. I am on, yeah.
Page 4. Page 4.
Budget summary.
I'm on page 4.
Budget.
I'll make sure I go to the bottom. Okay, so staffing and labor costs. And Corey talked about this a little bit. You know, this time last year, we were proposing adding a public works parks coordinator position. And, you know, during a lot of staff discussion and bandwidth discussion, we came to the conclusion that it would be best to have a co-compliance officer assigned in lieu of that position. So we did indeed hire that position, and he's on board right now. But that still left a lot of need in the Public Works Department, and we felt that need would be best filled with a engineering technician position. So that is the additional position that we're asking for in this proposed budget. And then as we go through the funds, you'll see that position's allocation through most of the public works funds, of course. So in terms of extra FTEs, that's all we have for this year. Any questions on that?
Would we have questions about the position? Wait until it's Paul's turn?
Sure.
You can fire away now.
You can ask
too.
now,
Okay.
yeah.
I just, you know, why call them an engineer? What are they doing that makes them an engineer?
Well, first of all, we want an engineering background, preferably, you know, somebody bright and eager, straight out of Oregon State or Utah State, or, you know, one of those engineering colleges. The reason we want them to be brought in now versus a year or two from now is we're wrapping up our master planning processes, and out of that are a lot of very large infrastructure projects that this person will actually be managing. So getting them up to speed now, so when they're basically hitting the treadmill running when we get the funding package put together and we start going to construction for a new reservoir, a new trunk line, lazy improvements, alternate route improvements. All those things are going to fall under this engineering tech to manage those projects with my help as well.
So will that mean we will rely less on our current engineering contractor?
No, we still need that stamp, that engineer of record that we use for all of our regulatory compliance, as well as some certain design work. This person will be able to work under them a little bit to gain experience, but more so be able to take that added load of work from our department and be able to manage it, because we're going to see infrastructure projects that we've never seen before. And there's going to be a lot of them. They're going to be very expensive and very large. So
Where are they going to be located? Physically here or out at the Public Works or in person?
to be determined.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah,
Okay.
more than likely here, but we need to strategize on space and efficiency as well.
Thank you.
Just one more thing on that note briefly, and we don't know to what extent, but they will potentially take a little bit of the land use development application review away from our contracted city engineer at this point. So you might see a little bit of savings there, and then they'll be able to really help also be a conduit between community development and public works, because there's a lot of coordination that goes on during that the master planning subdivision process, building permit, all that stuff as it relates to infrastructure. So this will be sort of a dedicated person who can help cross coordinate and collaborate between those departments as well.
All right, thank you. So the next item I want to talk about a little bit is an expanded version of what typically is a fairly simple adjustment, and that's the cost of living adjustment, or the COLA. So as most of you well know, we're experiencing kind of unprecedented inflation. And when the Social Security Administration came out with their adjusted COLA, I believe 5.9% back in the wintertime, staff connected and felt it was necessary to do a kind of a mid-year cost of living adjustment, which we did. That was 4.6% all across our pay plan classification. I can never say that correctly. And so when we calculated the COLA for this year, we used the same methodology and came up with 7.2%. So we subtracted the mid-year from the 7.2, came up with 2.6. Now, staff also received input that there was a concern that the pay plan would, if you apply a fixed percentage, especially a larger fixed percentage like inflation would apply, that pay plan for staff is going to broaden, and you'll have a bigger gap between positions, creating a little bit of an inequity for the COLA adjustment, which is a very good point. To address this, we came up with the average wage, employee wage, and applied the 2% COLA to that wage. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And what we came out with was a 0.82 per hour cost of living adjustment. And then we applied that 0.82 cents per hour to our pay plan classification. So that is our methodology of the pay plan. We kind of scratched our heads as to why, more jurisdictions don't do it that way. But my guess is because usually the COLAs are small enough that it really isn't impactful. But like I said before, with a lot of these bigger adjustments in inflation, you can see how it would kind of escalate as the years went on. So does anybody have any questions on that? Hopefully I explained that well enough. I know it's okay, good. So that's the COLA. All right. Okay, moving on to page 5. So also in this budget, similar to prior budgets, is a 3% merit based on performance for staff, and those evaluations will be coming up here next month. So everyone I know looks forward to that. The next thing I want to talk about is allocations and the reshuffling of allocations through funds. So as most of you know, all staff has allocations throughout departments and funds. We try to have those as equally assigned for the workload as is possible. It's easy to do that for a lot of the public works employees because they post their time. And so we know where all their time goes and we align those timesheets with their allocation. So there's a good methodology there. And then of course with, new positions such as the engineering technician, we try to make our best guess of how they will be utilized throughout the funds. But it's always evaluated in the budget process. And then as we go through the funds of the departments, I'll touch on a little bit of, why maybe personal services might be a little bit further up than you'd expect due to some of these, or lower due to some of these allocation changes, but there's not very many. Some help looking a little lower here, some good news with healthcare benefit premiums. The CIS insurance, our carrier, does not expect those to go up by very much. We're expecting just 1.5%, which is good, especially based on some of the prior years. We've had 5%, I think, for the last 2 years. And then the staff will continue to contribute 10% of the premium cost, and then the city will pick up 90% of that premium cost. Let's see, the next thing and lastly is PERS. So PERS, this is the second year of our biennium. As I stated in this message, we've been able to kind of weather the storm of increased rates. They keep projecting fairly positive returns from their investments. That lowers the rate by quite a bit, even 1/100th of a percent. In all likelihood, as some of these older retirees come out of the system, we should see rates stabilize, famous last words. But we've been able to, again, kind of maintain a reasonable increase without having to do any other strategies like some other jurisdictions have done as far as putting money aside for side accounts to lower their percentage and some of those tactics. So, yeah.
I just want to thank you for institutionalizing the first sentence. Per employee, policies merits are tied to performance through a formal annual evaluation of the 3%. This has been a 6-year process, and I think it's well deserving of the employees who go the extra effort to do the training, who put in extra effort to be rewarded at a higher percentage rate than the people that show up, don't do the training, and continue on. So I commend you for notarizing that.
Appreciate that. Okay, then lastly here, employee insurance and risk management, just at the bottom of the page. Some more good news with workman's comp. I touched on this topic with council already a couple times, but our insurance carrier, CIS, used to carry our workman's comp coverage. They no longer do that. SAFE does. SAFE is a state-ran workman's comp agency, and one of the reasons why CIS did that was because they just cannot compete with SAFE's rates. And we saw that. We budgeted $60,000, I believe, last year in workman's comp, all told, and our premium ended up being about $12,000. And that's a combination of better value from SAFE, but also, like I say here, we have really safety conscious employees. We do. We haven't, knock on wood, had some large claims, and so that greatly reduces our factor, and it's probably the most impactful element in the calculation. So, kudos to those staff. That's a huge savings citywide. Property and liability, those are due to go up again for the second year by double digits. There's when you're working with a pool insurance carrier, there's a lot of factors that are out of our control. There's a lot of law enforcement that's in that pool. Those liabilities have gone up. Property and replacement values have gone way up. So that's the most reason for some of those increases. They're not financially that impactful, but obviously as a percentage they are. So again, we're doing the best we can to mitigate those things. But we can only do so much that's within our control.
So there is not a pool that is just
Separate?
separate, we can't get in a pool that doesn't include firefighters and police officers and,
No, not that I'm aware of.
okay.
Yeah, and it's not all that. I think it's just the claims up in general, but that is playing a
Well, it
huge part.
probably helps our police and our firefighters to be in the pool with us.
Yeah, right?
Well, and I would add that given what's happening with fire insurance to many of us here in this community, with our rates being raised significantly based upon what happened in the Santiam Canyon and along the 126 corridor, it may be to our benefit to be in a pool with places in the valley and at the coast, because our fire risk, I think if we were on our own, without being in a pool insurance company, I think we'd have seen a significant increase in our fire and liability insurance for this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Okay, that's all I have for the staffing and the risk management component of it. Anybody have any questions or comments before we move on? Okay, so let's go down to page 9. Unless you want to go through the budget process. I don't want to bore you too much.
We're in the process. We know what's going on.
Okay. I'm going to skip. So page 9 is a good summary of all the revenue sources for all the funds. And these, looking more over here in the left column, those do include beginning fund balances. So as you can see, what we've done in the last 4 or 5 years, from 16 million all the way to 25 basically is pretty remarkable. And that's largely due to our revenue streams. So we'll skip into page 10 here. Let's talk about property taxes. So property taxes this year, we estimated a 7% increase in assessed value. Last year, we saw about an 8.9% increase. A lot of districts have gone with 8% and more. We went with 7% just to be a little bit more conservative. But obviously, as assessed values go up and new construction and new buildings go up, that number increases. So definitely a favorable revenue source, and it's nice to see it go up that much instead of going the other way or minimum increases. The levy rate will remain the same, 2.6417 per thousand. And we have a little graph of where we've been with property tax revenue. It's, again, 10 years, it's basically doubled, which is incredible. All right, so on to page 10, talking a little bit about transit room or lodging tax. We're trying to transition to just calling it lodging tax, so pardon me if I say TRT, because I'm used to saying that. But last year we really budgeted conservatively with TLT. We budgeted $750,000. We're expecting that to come in about $1 million this year. So quite a bit more, obviously, than we projected. We are trying to be conservative about, the impacts of COVID-19, barring any shutdowns or any restrictions in travel. Obviously, we didn't really see that happen last year. And we did budget the same $1 million thereabouts this year. It'll be interesting to kind of track how that translates to almost capacity, I would say, for the city. If all the hotels are full for 4 or 5 months out of the year, is that going to look like $1 million? So it'll be interesting to track that, because my guess is we'll have another, big tourism season this spring, summer, and early fall, and a lot of those rooms will be maxed out, is my guess.
And an additional comment, this also comes from STRs, short-term rentals, as well as the campground.
That's correct. Yep. As campground pays itself or pays the city in TLT as well. Okay. So there's some other fees in here that are probably, worth noting. Planning and inspection fees. Scott tries to project what construction fees are and planning review fees in order to assess those. Business license fees, if you look in the budget, those have kind of ebbed and flowed a little bit throughout the years. the past 4 years, I guess. And if you'll remember, we had a program that had a reduction of business license costs, in addition to just a delay of renewal for people and businesses to give them a little bit of relief. So we had a larger amount 1 year and a smaller amount the next year. We've seen that level out a little bit last year, and we'll probably continue to have that this year. And then state revenue sharing, we get that notice from League of Oregon Cities. That is basically a share of the cigarette and the liquor tax that the state receives, and we get that on a per capita basis. That should remain fairly steady. Don't see too many big impacts there. And the last one, which Corey already talked about, was the ARPA funds. So in August of last year, we received half of the $617,000, and we will receive that second tranche or second part this August. So that is included in our revenue for this year, and then we'll be, like Corey said, included in the reserve for future expenditures. We don't have a placeholder for that this year yet. That will likely be done in supplemental budget or in next year's budget, because we have until 2025 to expend those funds.
And just to add on to that briefly, it is one of the objectives under the council goals of good governance to develop a strategy for utilizing those funds. I think the intent is also preserving some flexibility in the ability to leverage the funds and use them as much as possible on certain opportunities. And we have a lot of key projects and opportunities that are in flux right now. So we'll know a lot more in the next 3, 6, 9 months. I don't think it's anyone's intention to sit on the funds or wait to invest the funds, but it is the intention to use them as thoughtfully as possible. So trying to find that balance.
Quick question. Can you summarize pretty quickly how much of the first amount of funds that we did spend?
Essentially all of it.
Right? Yeah, it was a little bit more, about $310,000.
Okay, just making sure. I knew the answer, but it's just good to put it out there,
Yeah,
so people have expectations about how much we're holding or not holding.
Correct. Yep, that's a great point.
I have a general question for those ARPA funds. Could you give a brief summary of what the guideline is for usage of those funds?
You wanted me to take that? Do you want to take that, Joe?
But it's up to you.
There's quite a bit of Treasury guidance as it relates to kind of the ins and outs of how you can use them, reporting requirements, things like that. My understanding, if my recollection is correct, you cannot use them on street infrastructure. You can use them on water, wastewater, broadband, housing, other community needs.
Lost revenue,
good point. So, I mean, they're pretty flexible for the most part. It's really that timeline that's probably the largest factor to consider. And then when you get into each one of those subcategories, like if you're in the housing category, there's going to be requirements around area median income percentage and things like that. So it really kind of depends where you're making the investment, and then there might be some other specific criteria for that.
So if we were to have an interest in extending broadband out in here, that would be a policy decision, obviously.
Potentially. I know the county invested ARPA funds in a broadband study for our region to better understand what the needs are and assess that and be able to then identify grants and potentially leverage other funds. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Point of clarification, though, the ARPA funds that would flow to us, say for broadband, would be expended within the city boundaries, would they not? Can they go outside the city boundaries?
That is a very good
I have no
question.
idea.
Yeah, I think you probably could, but I don't know if that would be advisable. Put it that way.
Just curious.
So if the county's doing a study, have we seen the results of the study, or is it ongoing?
It's ongoing.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
You're participating in that?
I'm on the broadband action team, and it's ongoing work. So bad.
Yeah.
I imagine, and this is just me spitballing, so if there was work done outside the city, I imagine we could probably contribute to it as long as it was benefiting the people inside the city. I imagine if it was not if it had no benefit to the citizens in the city limits, then I imagine it probably wouldn't be allowed. That's just me spitballing though, so.
That would be my guess as well.
Does that make sense? Okay. Anyway, thank you.
Okay, actually, I'm gonna stay on page 11 here, and I'm gonna apologize to Paul. Forgot about park user fees. So like we just talked about, we do have a campground that we own in town. We've seen that become very popular over the years. I think just about 5 years ago was at $200,000 was our annual revenue. Now it's projected to be about $300,000. We've done a lot in terms of being more efficient with our reservation system and a lot of other functionalities of the campground. And that is a really nice tool that the city has, quite frankly. It's something that we can control. It's something that we can contribute back to the community that does impact the community. So that's another highlight, definitely, and has, I would say, for the past several years been a highlight in the general fund revenue.
What do they charge a night there? Do you know?
Yeah, so it's either $25 for a non-hookup, $50 for a 30 amp, and $55 for a 50 amp hookup a night. And that's still about $10 less a night than some other campgrounds that are comparable in the area.
It's reasonable. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so going on to page 12 here, just some other highlights. Street fund. The street fund has a great stream of revenue from local gas tax, state highway tax, and franchise fees. We've seen franchise fees go up dramatically. I think we have one franchise that's left with 5%. The rest of them are at 7%. And that really enables us to maintain our streets and our right of way as we should. That does not even go to the general fund, which a lot of other cities do. So that's a great use of that money, as it should be in the street fund. Parking district fund, as we'll go through that later, you'll see that it'll be in the same income level as previous years. And then lastly, SDCs, as they have been the past several years, have really blown away expectations in terms of development. We don't see that slowing down in the near future. However, we try to budget a little bit closer to reality this year, I guess, instead of way too conservatively, but it's such a hard target to hit. But we do the best we can there. Okay, major revenues. Does anybody have any other questions?
On the parking district, this is clarification, do the property owners that pay that, or is it the business owners?
Business owners do. Yeah. Yeah, so when Kim sends out the business license renewals, they have a parking district line item on there with their square footage, and then the calculation for 5 cents per square foot, I believe, it's calculated forward. Okay. So I'm now on page 14. Thank you.
13.
Okay, let's get into some debt here. So in terms of the city, we don't have too many changes with our debt service for the year. We still have our bonds that go ahead.
Did you want to skip page 13?
Oh, did I say 13?
No, you said 14, but
Oh.
did you want to skip page 13?
Sure.
Be superstitious.
It was just revenue items.
Nothing to see there.
We don't have to.
No, I mean, is he on?
We just want to be able to follow along, Joe.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, you'd kind of wrapped up your SDC conversation, and that was the chart at the top half, and then there was a summary of the enterprise funds at the bottom. But you were shifting from revenues into
Yeah, I'm going to expenses now, but we can stay on revenues if you like.
No,
Okay.
I didn't know if you meant to do, I didn't
Some
know
of
if
us
you
got
meant to
lost
skip
in
it,
the
or,
Oh, sorry.
it's okay.
Is there anything you want to mention about enterprise funds? Because I don't.
No, we have our regular 2% increases for the water and the sewer funds per our sewer and water study a few years ago. And as Paul will touch on in the department goals for next year, we're going to commence more utility rate studies. We've done that consistently every 5 years, and then the refinement kind of at a midway point, just to make sure we're on track with where we should be at with those rates. And we'll incorporate some efficiency measures in terms of water usage and consumption with those updated rates as well. Okay, now ready to be on page 14? Okay.
Like 16.
So as I said before, the city will still pay its bond debt, and that's I think we're about at $4.5 million left with that bonding debt. That was at about $6 million in 2016. So we're paying that down, you know, as far as an early bond at a pretty good clip. We just made our $100,000 payment actually yesterday for the second part of that. And I'm going to touch on the URA debt a little bit right now. I probably will later as well. We did retire our URA debt with First Interstate Bank this last year. And then we also entered into a debt agreement with the city. So the URA and the city have a debt agreement to, it's kind of a way to transfer funds in the URA. The council has heard that quite a bit ad nauseum the last couple months, much to their chagrin. But so anyway, the URA right now does not have any debt, but again, we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get to that fund. So pretty healthy. You look at this graph, this is a similar graph that we used prior. You know, the city really does not impact its either ratepayers or taxpayers with a lot of debt. So we're fairly proud of that. Okay, reserves. On to page 15. All right, so reserves, we've expanded a little bit in the prior years. So Corey and I felt it appropriate to kind of touch on these a little bit and make sure that they're understood. The snapshot here in the middle of the page, or the lower third of the page, whatever, is general fund reserves. And the top line item here is kind of the leftover, if you will, of reserves. You would see likely the fund balance, I guess, combined with a couple of other reserves go into next year. But some of the things we've kind of added or enhanced and clarified are the affordable housing reserve that's restricted. Those of you might not remember, that is a percentage. It's 30% of our 0.99 of our TLT. You know, I didn't mess that up. And so that accumulates, and then whatever affordable housing grants are given by the council that's reduced by. So going into the end of 22-23, we project that to be 125,000. The tourism reserve that's restricted is very similar in that we have a commitment via state statute to tourism of a certain percentage of our lodging tax, and anything in excess of that we've earmarked as a restricted amount, appropriately so. And basically how that works is we have, you know, accumulation of TLT, what we're paying for tourism, and then the remainder is the reserve. So if anybody wanted any more detail about that calculation.
Can you just explain the percentages, just to?
Oh, yeah.
Just the percentages of what's restricted, what's not restricted, so everybody's clear.
So, yeah, so of the 8%, is it, well, actually, Joe, I'll let you take that, and then I'll just speak to that number.
Yeah, so that's a great question. Thank you. That's important to clarify that. So for our TLT is 8.99%. The 0.99 was added in 2016, and with any new percentage increase, there's a 70-30 tourism to general fund that you can do freely. The city council decided that 30% would be affordable housing. Obviously, the 70 is tourism. So that's 0.99. The 8%, 33% is restricted for tourism. So it's kind of the opposite of the 0.99. And the rest goes to general fund operations. And so that 33% is that restricted TLT.
Which historically has gone to the chamber.
Which historically has gone to the chamber, yes. And sometimes that, based on whatever the contract with the chamber has been, that it's been higher and lower than the 33%.
So that funding now will be for the
the destination management organization, and you will see that in the tourism department as we go through the book.
Yeah, so as we touched on briefly in the budget message, that $78,668 number is our estimated leftover after the $450,000 to the new DMO and the $65,000 to the Sisters Area Chamber of Commerce. That's what we're anticipating to be left over based on our beginning balance of reserves at the start of the fiscal year and our anticipated revenues for next year. And with those funds, we've said that our goal is not to, hold on to them and accumulate them necessarily, because we don't have something specific in mind to put them towards. So at this time, we would really be working with the new DMO to say, hey, if you need additional funds, come and make a request. We can grant those requests. Or if we're going to be putting funds more towards facilities or capital investments, potentially it makes more sense for us to hold those funds instead of the DMO, because likely if we're building something, we'd be the ones having the contract and building it. So TBD on those funds, but the point here is we really want to be very specific and transparent with how we're tracking those funds, which is exactly what we're doing.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next one, the law enforcement reserve. This was a reserve that we initiated last year, $136,000, and that is basically the annual cost of an additional deputy if we were to bring that position on. So we felt it wise to kind of earmark that just based on this being the last contract year of the contract with the Shutes County Sheriff's Office, and the potential need for another deputy.
The IG is going to go for a couple more years, but talking behind the scenes, instead of it had been 3 years previously, we did 5 this go around. So we're entering year 3 of that. I think maybe 4, 3, I believe. But anyway, talking with Lieutenant Davis and just sort of his anticipation, which is good, of thinking about the growth we've experienced and whatnot. He may be making a recommendation to consider adding another deputy in future years. And so that was why we sort of settled on that number, to just set that aside.
And below that is the rainy day fund. And if you take a look at that $540,000 and you look at the general fund's operating contingency, they're about the same, they're rounded. So the rainy day fund represents about 2 months of operating expenses for the general fund. And the operating contingency is also 2 months, so combined they're 4 months. And the logic there is, you conceivably have enough resources to last you from the beginning of the budget year in July until you receive your property taxes in November, the bulk of them at least. So that's kind of the methodology there. Just a good placeholder, good best practice for just financial stability. And then capital replacement reserve. This is a quantity that Paul works on, and that is meant to replace roofs, equipment. So we're kind of prepaying for those things instead of just going out and debt servicing those. So we're trying to be mindful of the replacement need for some of those assets.
So very strong reserves, very low debt, strong revenue sources. We're in good financial position for sure. And Joe, these funds, as well as all of our other, cash on hand funds, are held in the local government investment pool, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody? And then, lastly, we can touch on transfers and some capital projects. So the city doesn't have too many fund transfers. The main transfer is funds transferring money to the City Hall Debt Service Fund, which we'll go through. The City Hall Debt Service Fund doesn't generate its own revenue, but it does have an obligation to pay debt. So general fund, water fund, street fund, sewer fund all pay the City Hall Debt Service Fund because all those funds use City Hall in some way, shape, or form.
And I'd like to summarize what Corey said to the budget committee members who weren't at the city council meeting when we had our last audit. And our last auditor gave us a B++, and he doesn't give A's. So anyway.
She must consider an A minus.
If you don't give out A's and you get a B++, that's like A++, right?
Next year, we get to rate his service, or their service. Just kidding, maybe. Okay. So that's all I have for staffing, revenue, and major expenditures. Does anybody have any questions on that before we start chugging through the funds and departments?
Just a quick sort of a point of information, but we talk about the CIP plans down at the bottom of capital project. It's a 5-year plan, so each year as stuff goes off, additional stuff is added, so it's kind of a rolling 5-year plan. Am I correct on that?
It is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Want to skip a few pages and jump to general fund?
Yeah,
Page
unless
21.
anybody's got any questions about the revenue expenditure summaries, those are kind of just informational, nice snapshot of the revenue expenditures for the city as a whole, including URA and excluding the URA. I don't really think there's a need to go through all those. We'll touch on them when we go through all the funds. So let's start with, we went through a lot of the general fund overview on page 21. I think we'll start at page 22, if that's okay with everybody.
Yeah, and just to flip the script a little bit here, I think the best way to go through the general fund and the various departments as well as all the other funds after this is to sort of really turn it over to you all and see what level of homework you did and what questions and comments you maybe wrote on the side. I mean, we have, in one way or another, done a 360 perspective of, where we're at, why we're there, what resources we have, so on and so forth. And I don't think rehashing all of that necessarily is critical. So I think we'll go, again, department by department through the general fund and page by page, but instead of us presenting more of, what questions, what comments do you have noted based on what's in the city manager, council manager department of the general fund. I don't know if you had something else in mind, Joe.
No, that's fine with me. I mean, even touching on the fund summaries, we can speak to those a little bit, but I think going through the work plans and the accomplishments, and I can touch on a couple highlights of the summaries that'll probably add value. Other than that, I think any other questions that they have or feedback is fine. That sound good?
I'll start. I read through everything and then went back and highlighted, and the first thing I have is nice job. Really well done, easy to understand and explain and to follow your reasoning. So I'm happy to go the way that you suggested, if the chair is fine with that.
Good.
Okay.
So it would be, page 22 and 23, the council manager section of the general fund. Any questions, comments on objectives and or budget allocations in there?
I actually had a question about page 21, sorry.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
Go ahead.
Just a curiosity in the resources on the cell towers over time, why does that waver so much? It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. You would think it would go in one direction. So I was just curious why.
Yeah, that's a great question. So our cell towers do have some co-locate. So if, T-Mobile might have a piggybacked carrier with it, and that carrier, kind of like a sublease, will pay us an additional amount of money. If that person or that entity goes away, we get a little bit less. So that's mainly the reason why.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question too on that, on the event fees. I see they've gone from last year, 7,000 to 35,000 for this year. Is that what's bringing that increase on?
Yeah, so that a couple years ago, we kind of reassessed the way we bill our events. And also the last couple of years, we've seen little event activity due to COVID. So this year we expect a full event season, and we think that will align with a lot of the event fees that we're assessing, especially for a cost recapture approach, because there's a lot of time that staff puts into those events.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to clarify, that was a council level policy change that we did just a year and a half ago. Has it been 3 years already?
Just before COVID hit.
Okay.
Yeah,
sorry.
I think it was winter.
Time flies.
The winter before, actually, just
Yeah.
a few months before.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, that was definitely a policy
There was-
decision to recoup some of the staff time. Yeah.
The other one was the Justice Court. Is that because we got more police tickets and stuff coming in?
Yes, go ahead. Oh, so Lieutenant Davis has been busy with his staff, and you can see that in Justice Court fees. So we actually put that into the department for their assigned revenue line item. But yes, we expect that to, I mean, it's impactful. It's $5,000, and so
Which is fine.
we'll take
fine
it.
with that.
Yeah.
The other one was the property rental. I see we had quite a budget $9,000 last year, and we only have 1,800 this year.
Yes, so that's great observation. That's for the Chamber of Commerce. Obviously, we're not going to have any rental activity for now with what we know, that agreement. But we will have the Meta Beta building being rented for $150 a month to the Sisters Historical Society, Three Sisters Historical Society. So that accounts for that change in revenue stream.
And in relationship to the Justice Court numbers and the increase, it really shows how much more effective the current contract is for our community than what was happening in the past. That we're actually getting a lot more coverage. We're seeing coverage directed at our community, and we're seeing it there. I mean, it's a strange place to see it, but we're seeing it there. When you look at the numbers before, basically significantly lower because we were kind of hit or miss in terms of coverage from the Sheriff's Department. This is a great contract, and I'm very happy with the council that negotiated it at the time and with the way that they worked with us to maintain that. It feels good.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
On that note, do you as a council or you guys get reports from them? How many arrests, tickets, citation, all of that?
Yeah, there's quite a detailed report that Carrie sends out every 2 weeks or every month?
Monthly.
Every month to council with all those details in it.
And they're on the city website then?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh,
Some of it has been.
I've
passed,
looked,
some of it isn't.
and I haven't seen it. Oh.
Yeah, some of it we don't share just by their request, but I think there's some that could be shared potentially. Yeah.
Anything, I don't see a reason why they wouldn't share it, why you guys wouldn't share it, because that way the citizens are going to see, okay, they did so many traffic stops with so many tickets. I mean, that's just basic.
Yeah, so a couple
You're
things.
not giving.
So a couple things. We actually, the reporting, what was reported got changed at the beginning, was it the beginning of 22 or was it further back? I think it was the beginning of 22, might have been further back, where some of the information was more incident and property location specific that isn't necessarily insensitive or confidential, but it didn't feel appropriate to share publicly.
Oh, I agree with that.
So that got changed,
Right.
and we did have some information that was shared publicly, and then I'll take responsibility for this. I had been taking that information, the reporting, and putting it in the city manager memos that were going out monthly, and then those haven't been occurring for the last handful of months. So if you go back and you look at city manager memos from the beginning of this calendar year or into last year, scrolling down the memo towards the bottom at the back, you'll see those statistics. So moving forward, one thing we're considering is kind of a new quarterly newsletter. It could be more frequent than that, but we want to find ways to your point, get that information out. So there's a couple layers to that discussion, but yeah, it's a good point in terms of sharing and showing what all's getting
What
done.
they're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, we see the money amount,
Mhm.
but is that court costs? Is that ticket income? I mean, what is it?
Sure.
Joe?
yeah.
So I'm aware that the city is going to, in concert with the library, have an installation of EV stations.
Mm-hmm.
Is there going to be a fee for that? And is it going to be this year, in this fiscal year?
So those should be installed in the next couple months or sooner. And the library district is taking on that project, and they'll be kind of owning and paying for the use of those.
Okay.
We did plan for half the capital construction cost for us to contribute towards. And that's for this fiscal year.
So are we
current
going to
fiscal
be,
year.
is the city going to be getting a fee from that, a part of a fee from that?
What, a fee from who for what?
The
To pay for
people
the
that use-
electricity.
To pay, they pay to.
They're
use-
paying for the electricity. The library district is.
So there's no fee to go charge your car. So it's.
Oh, there
free.
it's free.
You don't have to put in a
Okay.
credit card to use it, like you normally do?
So they've had some turnover in some of their facility managers, but what they told us a year ago when we were planning for this was that they would put them in, monitor the power bill, and go from there. So they're gonna put them in, they're gonna cover the bill, and they're gonna see what that really adds up to. But
Okay, and
that's
so-
their cost.
So my question then is, we participated in the installation of the
We
facility,
split the cost of the infrastructure costs.
right?
Mhm.
So if they do start charging a fee, will the city be getting a part of that?
No,
Okay.
and to clarify, and I don't know the details, but all it would be is to offset the power cost. CEC doesn't allow you to, mark up their power. Like you're not going to generate revenue off of electricity costs. So it's only tied into one electric meter, and that's the library district's meter. And so if it costs them $2,000 a month, then they'll pay $2,000 a month.
Understand, thank you,
And that's the direct cost.
thank you.
And the city gave up 4 parking spaces on our lot for that?
Technically, actually, it was on their lot. The property line kind of runs through there. And yeah, I think it was 3 or 4 spots.
Well, when they start making a profit, they can pay you back.
Maybe we should offer to host the new library that they can't build in Bend anymore here.
Yeah. 20,000.
That was all my questions, Joe.
Okay,
Yeah, good points.
great-
That
great
page
questions.
21, really gives you the full picture of all the revenues there, resources.
I have a quick question, if you don't mind, on the city manager budget, this part of it. Do we expect any future costs, or are we anticipating future costs for possible pandemic issues if things change, or are we not budgeting for that? And if we have to deal with that, we'll just deal with it as it comes?
The latter, we
Okay.
haven't set any direct funds aside for that.
Just wanted to double check, thank you.
But this is very conservative to me. I mean, it seems to me, given the fact that, what the revenue is projected for the end of this year and what we're budgeting for next, we're assuming, there's been staff increases, there've been all kinds of increases, and yet our budget is less than it was, the actual budget for this year. So I think it's very conservative, so that if there is some catastrophe, we are well positioned.
I think you're talking about this particular fund only, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay, just making sure.
And I would just add, for the benefit of our citizen members, that when you look at the bottom line, you might notice that there's a significantly larger number on the bottom budget for 2021 than there is for 2022. But you really need to compare 2022-23 with 2020/21, because we had some URA stuff to happen there, and it exploded that budget up. But it's really right about where it should be at 161. Total is 307.
When I'm really comfortable relative pandemic, when we had the discussion about the reserves, because like you were saying, we're in good shape based on what you're reporting.
Yeah, and in terms of city operations, we've made a lot of investments in this room and this building to be able to facilitate meetings and information technology, audio visual, those types of things. So we've made those investments, which is good.
okay. So let's move on. Unless anybody has any questions about the council manager department, we can move on to finance. Sorry, get my mouse right. Okay,
Page
so,
24.
oh, thank you. Yep, we're on page 24. So I talked about this a little bit based on Chair Member Cobb's question and inquiry. We're just trying to be mindful of going to a cloud-based server. We learned a lot. We examined a lot of this and how that'll work from a functional standpoint for City Hall. So that's a big element. And then the other elements, just the agility, that it would allow. Now, obviously, the agility that it would allow is tremendous. But in terms of functionality, it might be a little bit more of a challenge. So we've got to try to find the happy median there between those two things. So that's something that we've got a goal to figure out this year. Also, kind of spurring off the COLA discussion here, for 22-23, we've made it a goal to conduct a salary survey to see where we're in alignment in terms of, you know, regional cities and cities with a similar size and budget. We also are going to evaluate our utility policies. This was something that we dug into again a lot this last year, and it's a bit of a peeling onion in that we have, you know, not only do we have a water rate study going on, but there's a lot of different factors that were revealed with COVID in terms of, you know, who's responsible for shutting off water, who's allowed to shut off their water, things like that. So we're gonna dig into that a little bit more this year and get something more solidified. This is something that we do from year to year, evaluate and enhance employee workstations. We've done that quite diligently over the years. That allowed us to have a kind of an agile work environment. People were able to work from home securely, which was important. So I think we're going to continue to do that. Develop URA financing strategies. This is something that we'll see again in the URA project fund, and that is, you know, the URA has $4.7 million of maximum indebtedness to go out for. And we need to figure out, is that going to be a public offering, a private offering, things like that. We have, you know, experts in the field that will advise us on what to do there. We've done all the due diligence with the bond counsel for that, but we set aside some funds just to kind of get a little bit further in that process. And then evaluate internal policies regarding finance and administration, and kind of just expanding that, seeing if any policies need to be reevaluated or added or deleted, removed. And then assist in the utility rate updates that we'll conduct with the water and sewer funds.
I have a question about you evaluated low-income utility program. Does that include the community grant that goes to FAN, that they have people apply to have their bills wiped off, or is that separate?
It's separate. We have a low-income utility program that we've thought it might be best to expand a little bit to allow more people to utilize it. There's a lot of restrictions, rightfully so, in our current program. So whether we add a different tier or just kind of expand the program altogether, we'll figure that out.
And will you have that figured out by August when we give out community grants, so that we're looking at what the request is versus what we're able to do internally?
Good question. Okay. Maybe. That might be ambitious, but we might be able to do that.
So what percentage impact do these reductions have on the entire fund?
Very, very, very minimal.
Okay.
Very minimal.
So we're not talking about big money.
No, nothing material. I don't even know if it's, I couldn't tell you an exact percentage, but it's not much.
And last question in terms of we haven't gotten to the actual general fund page, that's the next one, but how many FTE are in this department?
Oh, that is a great question.
Did I miss it somewhere?
No, that might be something that it would be value added. We have 0.9 altogether with three of us.
So you could just spread across multiple departments?
That's correct.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep. Okay.
Good question, by the way.
And if you feel that it would be value added to put that, okay, I can do that for the published budget with the FTEs in.
And you're gonna have to explain it.
Yeah, it's a little deceiving.
Yeah.
Just how we allocate across departments because we're so small and because we do so many things across.
Cross-pollination.
Yeah,
But I think that it's somewhat important when you see a salary number under personnel services of 116,000, whatever, that you know, part of it's F&E, and I mean, part of it's benefits, et cetera, but I think it is beneficial to know that it's not all going to you, it goes across multiple people.
Sure.
And that's information that I think we should be making public. Now, how we do it, I don't know, it can be tricky.
Yeah, the other way to think of it would be, allocating costs for FTE. If you're allocating from the council manager department or the finance department or anything in the general fund, it's all the same dollars.
I
The
understand.
departments aren't actually separate funds, right? And so if you're pulling from the street fund, that's a different revenue
Right.
source. That's a different, and so it's a subtle distinction, but it is, I think it's important too, in terms of like really knowing where the money comes from and where it goes. But anyway, we can clarify that a little bit better.
And it may just be this, that's at the initial page. The general fund supports this number of FTE
Total,
across multiple
yeah,
departments. That would be fine with me. Just something that points out to somebody reading this budget who's not here today, exactly how many, with it, well, you're heavy in staff down there, you know, you could save some money and get rid of some people. Well, let's show them how heavy in staff we are.
Sure.
We're not hiding anything. Been down that with other organizations.
Okay,
Any questions on page 25?
okay, so we'll scroll down to page 26. All right, Paul, it's your time to shine.
Chair Moyer, are you good still?
Yeah, I'm fine.
I mean, we're an hour and a half in or so, hour and 45 minutes.
Could we take
Yeah.
a break? Just
Before you have to listen to me, it's probably a good
Just a
idea.
5 minute. 5 minute.
Let's go have a 5-minute
Don't take too long.
5 minutes?
Sweet.
Thank you.
back, about 5
So
minutes.
the recordings and the mics will still be live during this break.
Okay. The mics are live.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's two.
What's that?
Cheese dish.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't see that. I shall be acquiring. Well, I had half.
No. Oh, no.
Yeah, I feel your pain.
All right. Okay, you get a hold of it?
I called and left a message. And then, yes, it's fabulous. I think we're gonna need your new cut up, I hope. Yeah, chugging along. Yeah.
Oh. Wow.
I hope it's down.
Oh, good.
And.
I think, what's the crux of your research? Yeah. As long as this mic isn't picking it
But
up.
in that kind of stuff, there's always a little bit of a tongue in cheek, you know, as well as existing strategies. I know that some of the stuff we get.
Oh.
Should be one. There's some that talk about.
Well, the 48 LLC or what?
We definitely do. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I know you do, yeah. Right now, right with you. I'm not seeing it. So it's almost like
Oh, okay.
they're not.
Okay.
And that's exactly.
I guess we're talking about.
They're employees of the county.
I saw the name.
If something happened, then people, but if you look at the cars, one of our requests, the new contract, the vehicles require assistance. So that it just kind of distinguishes them from the old. You'll see sometimes some of the apps online, people.
I worked for 7 different municipalities.
It's my position.
Yeah, I was
Coming from a larger organization.
So I spent.
5 or 6,
Public budgeting is.
No, I didn't, yeah, I'm going to,
15 years public budgeting.
private service commission and sign. Well, I mean,
And what I
For a heck of a
found,
deal.
one was
We don't pay, if they have to book somebody, we don't pick up the booking cost. Nope. It's all in the town, it's hired done. So, and I'm sure that.
I think it'd be great.
People don't understand that. No, but what we want is we want to see what we're up to.
well,
Yes,
exactly.
sweet,
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, I'll be curious.
perfect.
Well, I
I'll take one, yeah, one. Yeah. Awesome, thank you.
Locals in Jefferson, they come through that intersection of every stop. And by the time they're at my house, it's $40,000.
If I were,
City Street is 2 seconds away. So what do they say? Yeah, we live by the elementary.
no, I'll just do that.
So where were you in law enforcement? A little town called Eatonville up and by Mount Rainier. Yep. Speaking from one end to the other, the allergies kicked in last year.
Yeah,
So
it's fun.
I feel
No,
like
I'm good, I can't look at vid.
My first hat. I've fallen in love with it.
I have a number of hats. I've got a couple from Australia. One's made of this kangaroo. It's just real comfortable. You think it would be hot, and it's not.
You guys are okay?
Some straw hats. Places like that. Then I tend to go back to places with hats.
I'm a t-shirt guy.
I do t-shirts. I got a lot of those.
Carrie, you want me to make more coffee? I think we're good, Kim.
Pretty easy.
Oh, I'm gonna start salivating.
Took my diuretic.
I think so, I tapped it.
Figured I'd take it right around the 11
No
o'clock
closer.
time frame.
Okay.
That gives me 2 solid hours before I have to start
It's tough because I can't.
heading out the door to the
See over the
restroom.
screen.
If I'd taken it when I came here this morning, we'd had
It
it
is.
three breaks.
That's why I didn't take it this morning.
Yeah.
I'm going for the lay, I want the lay down desk. I want the one where the guys.
Cardiologist read me the riot act.
Oh, I imagine.
So
Yeah.
what I do is I bring it and I'll wait till I'm far enough in that I think I can make it to. And it didn't work real well yesterday. So today
I think we've been 7 minutes, so.
Okay,
Ready to gavel?
let's reconvene,
Yeah. Get everybody back in the room.
get everyone back. Okay.
Except for Paul. Robin.
Oh, they're all out, they're coming.
Yeah, Paul's the one that's up, he's the one that's not.
And Sue, thank you for asking.
Well, where's, oh, there he is back there, okay,
He's coming.
he's coming. Well, we're missing Paul, oh, there he comes.
All right.
Okay, Paul, you're on the carpet.
Okay, are we ready?
You're ready.
Okay. So we'll dive into the maintenance program in the general fund. A couple highlights. We got the car charging stations going in. Our guys are out forming the sidewalk right now around those. They should be set next week and ready to go in about a week after that. We completed our truck and equipment procurements. Thank you for that. And going into this next year, kind of a key theme all the way through all of our funds is environmental sustainability and wildfire mitigation. Both those are council goals, and so that'll be a reoccurring theme through all of our programs and funds. And the other thing I wanted to highlight is with the chamber building transitioning to a new DMO, destination management organization facility, there will more than likely be some changes that need to happen there, whether it's partitioning off office space or just doing small remodel work to the existing building. So we allocated some funds for that.
Oh, I have a quick question about that building. It's a tiny bit off topic. Is there a name of that building, or are we just calling it the First Street building?
First Street building.
Okay.
Works for us.
I think there's an opportunity there for naming a city building for somebody important, possibly down the road. Just wanted to throw that out there. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions on our maintenance program?
I'd like to say thank you for also getting a lot of money for the equipment that you sold as well. It's a good year for that.
The used truck and the used equipment market is yeah, I wouldn't say sustainable, that's for sure.
And I want to say I saw the new street sweeper go by the other day, and it is definitely an upgrade from what you had.
The guys think so as well.
Has better flashing lights.
Okay, moving forward to page 28 for tourism.
So I'm not going to go through all the backstory here. We've covered a lot of it already. And then flipping to, if you have questions on 28, that's great. Also flipping to 29, it just shows how we've set aside those funds for the chamber and the contracted services with the new DMO. And then, we alluded to the restricted tourism reserve previously as well. So any questions on department work plan objectives and budget allocations for this department?
Looks like no questions.
Okay, moving on to page 30 for parks.
So a couple of highlights, did a lot of work over at the Creekside Park and Creekside Campground this past year with improvements to our pedestrian bridge, to the campground itself, including retasking the Village Green Playground to that area for the park users and overall users of the park system. We do have a few projects that did not get done, and largely is due to staffing and equipment procurement issues that we have seen with the just with the supply chain issues throughout construction industry. And our goal is to be as strategic with these dollars as possible. If it doesn't need to be done, if it's not critical that we get it done in the budget season that we're looking at, then we will delay it, because we believe that demand obviously will correct itself. And with that, the supply chain can fix itself, and we can get back to a little bit more normalcy with pricing and with staffing availability. So for 22-23, we want to complete the master plan for the parks master plan update. We also want to complete the master plan that we're just getting going on the East Portal property for a future mobility hub. We want to complete the Creekside restoration work that will be largely done by the Upper Deschutes Watershed Council this summer. And then again, environmental sustainability, our water is a very big focus for us. And we want to make some investments in reducing water use in our parks. So with that, any other questions? More than happy to answer.
With the White Shoes Creek work at Creekside Park, does that go also over to Buck Run Park to rehab the banks that were kind of pulled out when we did the sewer project last year? I never
So
hear
we're
that
gonna-
park mentioned separately, so sometimes I wonder, oh, is that just Creekside Park?
We're gonna look at that with those guys here in the next week or two. They're doing some value engineering. I know the primary focus is between the bridges, but we're wondering if there is an opportunity to strengthen the stream banks where we actually cross the creek, then obviously be a good time to do it.
I had to yell at some deer this morning that were eating some baby plants in that space.
Oh, no.
It's like, no, we need those plants.
I want to make a comment, Paul, on this fund, but on some of the past funds is that it's amazing. I know we're doing more than we've ever done in our parks, and the budget doesn't really reflect that. It's still pretty much the same budget. It's going up a little bit. And I just want to commend not just you, but all of staff, but especially you. This is your fund. So thank you for getting all that done. I mean, honestly, it's a lot of work. We know it, so.
Appreciate that.
And just a quick question on revenue. The park user fee, that's primarily campground?
Yes.
Thank you.
I had a clarification question on projects like, just out of curiosity, like East Portal, or just say we don't get that Elm Street grant funding to finish that bike lane. Is that something that we could use TLT dollars, since they are amenities that tourists use?
That's a whole nother conversation. I probably would advise against adding it into projects like multi-use paths. I think if it was, restroom facilities or things that were a little bit more directly tied to visitation in particular, you could make that argument. But I mean, we haven't even really talked about putting TLT towards like actual tourism facilities, let alone kind of facilities that are also used by tourists, if you get the subtle distinction I'm making. So short answer is possibly, but I think we would need to have a lot of discussion before we considered something like that.
And I want to touch back on my initial question. Looking at this whole budget of $433,428 and what Paul does with it, I think it's important to note that we're only subsidizing that out of the general fund to the tune of $103,000. The campground is it's one of the reasons we have such a good park system across the entire community, without having to have a big hit on the general fund. And I agree, the parks look excellent. I'm always amazed, having been in a park district and knowing how much work it is to maintain good turf and other things. This astounds me for the amount of money, but I think most people don't understand that the campground itself is the primary funding mechanism for what we do with our parks.
Okay. Moving on to page 33 for law enforcement.
Sure. So as we've talked about quite a bit already, we've got two major cost components to our annual CERT law enforcement services through the IGA with Deschutes County. You've got the fixed costs, and then you've got some variable costs, which include potential recruitment costs, overtime costs, things such as that. So just again, as outlined in the IGA and inflationary escalators, that's what our anticipated costs for the services are this coming year. And we talked a little bit about also the reserve that we've set aside for potential discussion next year about the following fiscal year. So any questions or comments on law enforcement?
Huge success is all I can say. Our main public safety component. One of them.
All right, Scott, page 34.
Okay, just taking a look at, looking back at 21, 22, we were able to, this is an ongoing thing, but obviously hiring the code and compliance officer was a major step towards improving the nuisance code compliance program. And then we have a bunch that are in process. As Corey mentioned earlier, the efficiency measures project is underway, and we're getting into the thick of that. It should be wrapped up by the end of the year. Also, along with that is the housing plan update. Both those projects are tracking along simultaneously because there's a lot of interrelatedness going on there. The lighting code is also, the update of the lighting code is in process. Had a hearing with the Planning Commission last week. And so that's underway and will be concluded probably sometime in the summer. We're working with Deschutes County to utilize some of their grant funds that they pass through to us to do some historic preservation awareness. We're going to create a story map that will be housed on our website that will contain a lot of information about Sisters history and some of our local landmarks that we have and potential future landmarks of buildings that we may someday get listed as a landmark. It's under the guise of community education. We're continuing development code amendments. We're always continually updating the development code as necessary. One specific one mentioned here is tree removal. Continuing to fine tune our tree removal process. There's the public side that goes, public trees that go through the Urban Forestry Board, and then the ones on private land go through community development. So we're continuing to refine that process to make it, to protect the trees and to also streamline the process of getting trees that are dead or diseased removed efficiently, and making sure that that they're only removed if an arborist, certified arborist, says they need to be removed, versus just taking the word of a property owner. Things that, objectives that are still under consideration, we just haven't gotten to that point yet, are the urban growth boundary expansion, possible urban growth boundary expansion. We want to plan ahead for that. It's related to this efficiency measures discussion, and will inform what and how much urban growth boundary amendment that we'll have to pursue next fiscal year. And then as Senate Bill 762 requirements related to wildfire mitigation come down the pike. It's in rulemaking right now, but we're getting close to getting more information, such as the risk mapping that's going to occur, and will tell us a lot about, based on that, what Sisters is, and we anticipate we're going to be in the extreme, high to extreme category, so that'll correspond with some code requirements that we'll have to implement, such as defensible space and building code requirements, and then a lot of community-wide education that will go along with it, that our new code compliance officer will be heavily involved with. So just looking forward to next fiscal year. As I mentioned, the efficiency measures will inform a lot. We'll also have to update our buildable lands inventory to see where we're at with how much land we have available to accommodate our anticipated housing needs, and that'll inform what scope the urban growth boundary expansion would undertake. And that process could be well over a year to year and a half process from when we say go to all the work that needs to be put together to actually file an application to going through the process will take quite a long time. So that money that we're proposing to budget would straddle probably several fiscal years. Expanding partnerships with our county, state, and federal governments regarding wildfire mitigation. We held a first meeting last week of local partners here in the Sisters area. We have regional discussions about wildfire mitigation, but we convened a more local one to make sure that recommendations and things that we can do on a much smaller local level, that we're communicating those back and forth, and we're creating communication and updating websites, and especially defensible space, I think will be probably one of the biggest components, how we partner with the state to get that done. So that's ongoing. Continue to implement the recommendations of the 2021 comprehensive plan. There's quite a few recommendations that came out of that. As I mentioned, the outdoor lighting part of that, a component of that process is hopefully developing a fund to assist homeowners to be able to implement those changes to their lighting. There will be a to be determined amount of time to bring all your lighting into conformance, and there's an interest, I think, on the part of the Planning Commission, and I've heard from the council too, to create funds for folks that have a hardship to try to meet that. So some of the money that's being proposed in the budget would help with that. And then implement priority recommendations from the housing plan, which there'll be quite a few of those. Are there any questions I can answer relative to that?
Just a quick one. Can you show in the budget the line items for the outdoor lighting and the city arborist removal assessment, please?
What was the second part?
Just where in the budget does it have it for those two items, the public outdoor lighting review and?
That's a great question. They're all in contract services.
Okay, thank you.
726.
That's all I needed to know. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing.
Okay.
Yep.
Just FYI, two great things. I love it. I just absolutely love it. Anyway, that's it.
Okay. Economic development, page 37.
Yep. So touched a little bit on this earlier, but the reason for budgeting 45,000 in this proposed budget is to have the discussion, have the council discussion and decision through the summer into early fall, whether to reconstitute the full-time program or continue with the part-time services. We've been a little bit, not in flux, but we've sort of tabled that for the last year, or it will be about a year by the time we get to the fall. So making that decision at that time is advisable. And if we don't choose to move forward with the full-time program, the $45,000 will go unspent and just roll to the following fiscal year, the additional beginning fund balance. The current part-time MOU, the cost of the employee's time is actually from county funds. And so we are not currently expending anything towards those services. So some TBD for sure in this department, but I think we're prepped for that discussion and are able to go in either direction when council so chooses. Any questions on program dollars?
The fact that the county is providing the funds for these services, is the county gonna go, well, why should we put money into it if the city isn't putting money into it? Are they gonna question that?
They might. Been working with EDCO and John Stark, their interim director, with budget requests for the county because they're going through the same process at this time. The main distinction is that the county funds EDCO. I don't know the exact number, but it's several $100,000 both to EDCO and Bend regionally, as well as the satellite programs in Lapine and Redmond and Sisters. And the main distinction is that the county has funds that are dedicated to economic development. They're Oregon lottery funds that must be spent on that purpose, and we don't get any of those lottery funds. So our allocations in past fiscal years have been unrestricted general fund dollars, which is fine, but it's just a little bit of a different calculus, I guess. But that might be a question we get. We haven't had those conversations if that's an ongoing thing that we could continue. Maybe if it is part-time, maybe we would supplement a little bit. I mean, again, one thing talking with EDCO too is that labor costs, again, have gone up. They're trying to make those positions more competitive, whether it's full-time or part-time. So these are based on historical figures. So it could very well go up, whether we're going full-time, part-time, and contributing to one or the other. So a lot of moving pieces. But they're willing to work with us along any of those lines. The partnership is still strong for sure.
So on again, this is a curiosity question, but for the new codes relative to SB 762, are there going to be new codes for hardening, new construction in our town? Hardening the buildings and for new construction?
Yeah, excuse me, my understanding is that if you're in the high-risk mapping zone, that hardening of materials is a component of the building code requirements. So for new construction and.
Well, you earlier said that Sisters is probably going to be considered high risk.
That's what I understand.
Yeah, so it'd be anywhere in Sisters.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so that is the last department in the general fund. You know what follows those pages? We have a general summary of capital expenditures for the general fund, and then we have the complete spreadsheet. So this spreadsheet, about 5 pages, kind of encompasses all the departments, all the revenue, all the expenses. This is what you're used to seeing, that we used to go through department by department, but now it's more of a summary presentation for you. And so that's page number, that starts at page 40, and again, it goes to 45. 44, excuse me.
44.
Yep.
Okay. I had a question on page 39.
Okay.
Looking at those projects,
Yes.
would you explain why it's determined that those projects would come out of the general fund as opposed to other funds? The
Great
like
question.
paving work and,
Yeah, I mean, that paving work, that's just how it's shared. You know, we have similar to personnel, we kind of have, we have a multitude of different departments using HQ. And so it's only appropriate for us to spread that.
oh, so that's a shared expense?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
I was gonna say, that was a cheap paving job.
Yeah, right.
Well, there's 2 phases to that paving job, right? Yeah, so.
And that's the case with all of them? It's just a proportionate share?
It is, and it gets a little muddled with the account numbers there. I know those it's a bit like, you know, hieroglyphics, but that does kind of denote where those lay.
Okay, I got it.
And that first one is actually, is that 5 accounts, and then the next one's 4 accounts?
Yep.
Yeah. And on page 40, we have SCED fundraising. So we're still doing that we're still raising funds with the SCED board?
Oh, so only if we return to the full-time program. And so what we did is we took the historical number for the 3rd year of the MOU, which this is the 3rd and final year of the MOU we entered 3 years ago. And in there, it said in the first year, I'm gonna be off slightly, you know, it would be $8,000 of fundraising. Second year, I think, was 10, maybe 11, and then 3rd year was 13. So what we did is we took the 3rd year number, 3rd year expense, and the 3rd year fundraising revenue and prorated them 75% for 3/4 of the year if the full-time programs are reconstituted in the fall. But I mean, that was certainly, I cited earlier, several reasons why the council decided to pause the full-time program. And one component was that the private sector fundraising had not come anywhere near meeting its goals. So just something to plan for, but again, it's contingent on the full-time program if you all choose to go that route.
So that's essentially a placeholder.
Correct.
Thank you.
Great job.
Did anyone notice the format? It's a portrait format instead of landscape. Is that difficult to see? Is it it's too small, or?
No, I
Which you like better?
was gonna commend you on it, yes.
Okay.
And the only way you can make it a little bit better is getting a monitor that's portrait, so when it's up there, it's portrait.
Oh, I like that.
So that's just an idea.
Yeah, great idea. Just
I'll check that off my
less
list of-
flipping of the binder, I guess.
Let's, you know,
Yeah, it's nice not to
No-
have to
no
rotate the
scrolling.
binder
Yeah,
and bang the
carpal tunnel,
microphone.
you know.
Yep.
well, if you can fit it on the whole screen, there's no scrolling whatsoever.
Right. Okay,
Technology.
if there's not any other questions, everyone go to page 45 and get the street fund kicked off here.
Paul?
All right, this is one of my favorite funds, largely because I love the smell of fresh asphalt in the summer. So, with that said, we adopted our transportation system plan amendments that we worked on for about 14 months prior to adopting them this past fall. Very important as we look out at our 2040 growth assumptions. That was the primary focus on that project. We have started implementing traffic safety improvements around town. You're probably seeing a few 20-mile-an-hour signs in the neighborhoods. Those are going up as we speak. And the 20 is Plenty campaign will be live and rolling here in a couple weeks. Another big project for us, and we believe for the community, is, and especially the northern portion of Sisters, up in the Clear Pine and the Grand Peaks area, as well as the industrial park, is the completion of the Pine Street multi-use path. So objectives for 22-23, you'll see some of these projects crossing over between funds. We did that largely because we're going to be putting together funding strategies, and a lot of these funds will participate in that funding strategy. So that's why you'll see them cross funds. We want to continue implementing the high priority safety projects. We got a pretty cool school zone project going out on McKinney Butte with flashing school zone signs and driver feedback signs to help with safety in that area, as well as some intersection control improvements in town. We're going to start designing the Barclay Drive improvements, which will be a 3-lane cross section through the alternate route on Barclay Drive. And then we want to continue to progress with Adams Avenue. We have the design complete. Now we want to put together the funding package, so we allocated some dollars for that. And then we want to take that momentum and start working over on the south side on Washington Ave, working with those property owners, like we said we were going to do in the TSP, to come up with a preferred design concept and then start design of that project. And then we, like I said, have our typical overlay, seal coat, and chip seal projects that are the bulk of what this fund is responsible for doing. We overlay about 1.2 to 1.5 road miles a year, so double that for lane miles. And we're going to be doing the same amount as we did this year, next year for overlays. So, any questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
On the Barclay Drive improvements, will that include bike lanes and sidewalks?
It'll include multi-use paths on both sides.
Okay, great.
To keep the bicycles actually out of the vehicle travel lanes.
Thank you.
I have a question also, Paul, and it kind of, did I interrupt you, Susan?
No, you did
Okay.
not. Thank you.
And it's sort of probably a state highway issue, ODOT issue, but even though we know there's going to be a new elementary school, it's still 2 years out, realistically, no matter what you hear. I've done 3 schools, it's 2 years out. And I think that it'd be nice to have those flashing school signs like you see all around town, other towns on Highway 20 at the Locust Interchange. You know, they could be solar powered, as you know, so they could be moved after the buildings put to other use. But I'd like to see something there, if we can, for the next couple of years. I think it's a real safety issue.
Yeah, we've been working with ODOT to try to get those out there, and they have issues with them being with multi-lanes of what vehicle you're picking up. So that's the reason why they don't have them in that spot. But when we do go to a single lane cross section coming into town with a roundabout, they'll be able to implement those type of devices.
That reminds me, that intersection of Locust and East Cascade right in front of the elementary school, that is, because I live, I use that. It is so dangerous around 3 o'clock. because there's people lined up on 20 coming in. They're coming in from in front of the city hall and the other way, and it's horrible. And then there are some children walking. So I was going to suggest that maybe we ask the sheriff to make sure someone's there, maybe helping direct the traffic just for that period. I know that's an extra cost, but I just want to throw that out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know they had dedicated some additional time, either the SRO, school resource officer, or maybe one of the other deputies for a while, but I don't know if they had sustained that, 9 months out of the year. So yeah, we have a front row seat as well and notice those challenges, and I think it's a multi-pronged approach, which the ultimate solution is relocating the elementary school. So
Yeah.
it might be challenging for the next couple of years, but there are little things we can do. So we'll continue to have those conversations.
Thank you.
And I think in our traffic study, that was the #1 intersection for accidents in the city, wasn't it? #1 or #2, so it backs that up. It's not just anecdotal.
And rest assured, when I'm out in the public talking about the roundabout, that's the #1 thing I say. So
Yeah.
we're working on it constantly, I guess, is the best part. The easiest.
Top of mind.
I have a question about resources in the age of infrastructure bills and kind of a lot of money coming out of DC. Are we seeing any of that money? Because it seems like everything's kind of coming from, our revenue, our traditional revenue stream. So are we getting anything from the state or federal level?
We have put our name in the hat. I think that's putting lightly. We have put ourselves in line for both federal and state funds coming out of that. So
We're just not budgeting for it because we don't know yet.
we don't know yet, but we're hoping that, that is the complete package for those improvements out there.
A lot of times too, depending on the project, the funds might not flow through the city budget. And in that case, we would reflect them, we'd reflect our contribution. But ultimately it'll go to the contracting, and I should say oversight party. So if ODOT is overseeing the contractor, funds would go to ODOT and then they would pay for the project. So, but yeah, one thing that we do have in this budget are the state transportation improvement funds that we secured for the East Portal Master Plan. So, and we are working, the goal is to have an aggressive timeline to put ourselves in a position to apply for capital funds in the late fall, early winter, to help build what that master plan is going to show. So yeah, to Paul's point, we're definitely put ourselves in positions, and we've taken some swings and misses, but we also know there's a lot more, some pending opportunities right now, and more coming down the road too. So.
Good. And one other thing is that I just want to say I'm really proud of the poor fathers and mothers who kind of came up with our local gas tax. Sat on a committee in another community, I won't name it, that tried to do this, and I can tell you everything you shouldn't do if you want to get a gas tax, but I think this was, it's not a huge amount of money, but every little bit helps. We get a lot of through traffic that use our streets and facilities, and they pay their tiny little bit of fair share. So I'm just really glad that we have something like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think we've continued to, one number that I hadn't even looked at that closely was that CEC franchise number.
Yeah, it's
and,
big.
Right when, back in 18-19, when we brought that up to 7%, 2018-19.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry,
I was
my bad.
going, wow.
Sorry. You can really, part of it is, there's multiple factors, but a significant portion of that is that franchise percentage increase. So yeah, having a strong, stable street fund that the general fund doesn't have to subsidize is
Rare.
Yeah, to some extent a luxury, for sure.
And
But
look what's happening in Bend, where they have to pass, pass bond measures to try to do street
Correct.
improvements. They're just barely scratching the surface.
Yeah, the cool thing about the local gas tax is when that was approved, actually city council could have approved it. There was a time period where the state was allowing that, but the city council at that time put it out to the voters. And I think the voter approval was like right around 75%. So I think we had a community that was bought into that same thought process that our users system-wide should be helping pay for it.
Okay, so moving on to the street SDC fund, and that is on page 50. Excuse me, 49.
So I wanted to touch on a couple things with the Locust and US 20 roundabout project. We have gone out for, about a little over $6 million worth of asks for our state and federal partners to consider. We're anticipating responses from those fairly soon, and we are cautiously optimistic as well. So with that, we are getting ready to finish, just dive in with ODOT and finish the design. If we do get construction funding for a spring 2023, is that right? 2024, sorry.
No, I've been doing the same thing.
Construction start for that project. So we'll have about a year plus to finish the design and secure the right of way for that project. And then, yeah, we finished the 100% design and cost estimate for Adams Avenue. So we'll be looking to put that funding package together. And then we want to construct the Elm Street Multi-Use Path project, hopefully with the help of an Oregon Park and Recreation grant that we applied for. And that'll be a multi-use path from Village Green all the way out to the old Peterson Ridge trailhead, the access point off of Tyee, and that includes a separated pedestrian bridge as part of that project.
Cool.
Paul, is the reason it's stopping at the old trailhead because that's the city limits?
It is.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you.
So we've been banking dollars in this fund through this construction upcycle that we've been living with. And we're about ready to hit the road with a lot of construction funding in the next couple of years.
Millions.
Good work ahead.
Millions, hopefully.
Yep.
Bless you.
And just a little data point for us, working with ODOT and our summer traffic ops group that we work with every year. They have been doing analysis on the alternate route. Also, they're doing analysis on traffic times through town from essentially out at the viewpoint on the west end to Black Butte, the east end of Black Butte to the west end. And what they're seeing is, our traffic numbers are going up about 10% a year.
Mm-hmm.
And traffic time is actually going down or staying even during the peak times, especially with the westbound. So we know without even advertising it and promoting it that the alternate route is actually working. So we were pretty pleased to see that.
And I just have a general SDC question since we're starting in those funds. And this is either for you, Joe, or Corey. We should expect to see some declining SDC revenues as we're essentially, in many cases, built out on our larger projects at this time. Is that an accurate thing, that we wouldn't see kind of the big SDC growth we saw maybe the last 3 or 4 years?
I mean, they're paid at time of building permit, right? So to the extent that we have subdivisions that are platted and entitled and still have hundreds of units to be built out, as
so
long
it comes with that at that point.
I'd say it's more the broader market of construction versus land supply, but you're not wrong. I mean, if we didn't act, we would reach that point in 3 to 5 years potentially.
Thank you.
Okay, so looking ahead to page 54 at the Park SDC Fund. Paul, back by popular demand.
So the big project with this fund this year was to update our Parks Master Plan. We are right in the thick of doing that work, and that is going to continue into next year. With that, we'll get a new capital improvement project list, and that gives us the tools to go and update our park SDCs to reflect that project list. So you're going to see that in the water fund as well as the sewer fund, updating those master plans, updating the CIPs, and then updating the SDC rates as well in all three of those funds. So that's, again, going back to kind of the construction cycle that we've been planning for, and we're seeing is we're doing our planning work. Now we're doing our funding work this next year, and then hopefully with some luck and some correction in the market, we can see some construction going in the year after that. So the other project with this is obviously the mobility hub on the East Portal. That's not only a transportation project that's going to benefit our community, but also some park amenities potentially there as well.
One thing, just real quick, Councilor Letts, you mentioned it earlier. I mean, I do think we strategically want to talk about these reserves and these resources specifically with parks and the potential for transient lodging tax and multiple funding streams to support building new amenities in the community. Because, I mean, our Public Works Department knows better than anyone how our parks are tourism amenities and how our tourism amenities are parks. And, you know, to the extent that we're covering that in operations and maintenance and all that, we're good. We're in good shape there, as you've seen. But if we start talking about building, you know, new amenities, $1 million amenities, et cetera, we're going to have to get creative with multiple funding sources. So this is a great reserve with these SDCs. And to Paul's point, we're going to hopefully put ourselves in even a better position with the updated capital improvement plan and so on and so forth. But looking at some other revenue streams and how do we combine those is going to be part of the thought process in the coming years as well.
Okay.
Yeah, if you didn't think thinking about this next fiscal year was enough, start thinking about the next 2 or 3 at the same time. It's a little more fun when you start thinking that way too.
Well, it's not just a general fund savings account. This is slated for specific things, so.
At some point, you do want to spend the money.
Yeah.
It's great to have reserves,
Right.
and we're safe in many ways, but at some point, you want to put these funds to work.
Yeah.
So we're ready to be having those conversations.
Yeah, and we're gonna do it.
All right, so to page 56 for the Parking District Fund.
So this is a pretty cool little fund that we have that was originally intended to obviously create more parking in the downtown core, which is the district. With that, we have done sidewalk and parking continuity projects on Main Avenue, Hood Avenue, and the side streets. And now we have been banking dollars in this fund to help construct additional parking with the Adams Avenue streetscape project. So not only are we going to be rebuilding a beautiful streetscape on Adams Avenue, but we're going to be connecting those side streets and developing parking, diagonal parking on all the side streets between Cedar and Pine Street. And this will be part of the funding component of that. So nothing real exciting this year, but again, setting ourselves up for a cool construction project.
I have a question about the department work plan. In the past, I think just 1 year, the snow removal has come out of this parking fee. Is that continuing this year? No?
I don't think it has ever. It's always been a street fund item.
Okay.
So,
And I think,
Why I thought it came from park fund.
and I think for clarity, I think whether we've done it explicitly or not, we've tried to keep this fund, the parking district fund, for capital projects, right?
Yep.
Delivering additional parking
yes.
capacity in downtown.
Yeah, it doesn't have a maintenance function to it. It's a capital construction fund.
Thank you.
And why was this year's license and fees revenue so low? We waived something or
Of the what?
the licenses and fees revenue?
Yeah, that might be an oversight. I was looking at that too. The 5,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll probably be a little bit low. I think it's probably because usually the projections are based off of prior year's income in certain months. They're kind of pro forma, if you will. So in the prior years, we haven't had that. So it'll likely be, the fund balance will likely be about $10,000 more than that. So probably looking at about 290,000 if I was to guess, but that is a great catch.
That's one of your Easter eggs.
Yeah, that's right. You caught it. I'll write that down.
Not an
Good
oversight,
prize.
it's an Easter egg.
We gotta make it where money years now.
Okay, I'll give Paul a little bit of a break here. So let's go to page 58. This won't take long. I touched on it a little bit earlier. This is the City Hall Debt Service Fund. The sole responsibility of this fund is to pay its own share of the debt. And it gets paid in with other fund contributions, and then it goes out as the debt service is paid. And the debt service for the City Hall actually will expire in 2028. So we're coming up on having this place paid off, which is awesome. It'll be a $50,000 worth of savings a year. So.
And kudos to the council that built this building for expansion. That was smart thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before we go on, I just want to say thank you for all your work in all those parks and roads and everything else. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, he's not done yet.
Water.
More to come.
If you don't thank him, then you'll fall in a pothole somewhere.
Okay. I don't want to do that.
All right, Paul.
The
We're up.
good stuff here.
That's right. Page 60, Paul will discuss the water fund here.
The underworld.
So a big project for the water and the water SDC fund this year was to update our master plan. Perfect timing coming off of the work that Scott's team did with the comp plan update. So we have dove into our water production, our water consumption, our water loss, our population growth demands, and basically we're looking at a 20-year master plan out to 2042, and what it's going to take to serve a population of almost 6,900 people. So a lot goes with that. A lot of large infrastructure projects are going to go with that. And we're going to end up with a 10-year capital improvement plan. Once this gets adopted, we're thinking adoption is going to be this summer. And then we're going to go into, not only how do we fund these large capital improvement projects, which some of them will have an operating fund contribution to them from the water fund, as well as an SDC fund. So when you take a pipe and you go to upsize it, you're replacing a pipe. So the size of the pipe that you're replacing that comes from the operating fund, and you use the SDC fund for the additional capacity from a larger pipe. So both of them will participate in quite a few of the projects. With that comes the fun part of looking at your water rates. So we looked at our water rates and sewer rates last year just to see how we were doing with the existing consumption and fund growth, as well as fund expenditure growth. And now we're going to be looking at that updated capital improvement plan and how that affects our water rates. So with that, we assume, and I think it's safe to assume, that the cost of the CIP is going to be more than what it is today. So how does that affect the water rates? They typically go up.
And just to be clear on that particular topic, we're also going to be folding in conservation requirements and looking at all that as well. Is that correct?
Yes. So we have kicked off kind of a multi-year conservation campaign, and we're just getting that going You'll see some stuff coming towards you or to you in the near future on that. As well as we did some water rights work this past year, mostly centered around well 4, our newest well. And our existing water right, you remember, allows us to pump about 1,000 gallons a minute out of that well. We're able to do some transfers with other rights that we have for our other wells and basically almost create a well field to where we can actually run that well at 1,500 gallons a minute without having to procure a new water right. So that was good news, good work done by our consultants with Oregon Water Resources to make that actually doable. So.
And I think I know the answer to this, I'm gonna ask it anyway, and that is that should, and that's a big should, we look at a UGB expansion down the road, we have sufficient water with the well 4 to be able to handle that, or we have to look at another well as well on top of it?
We are looking at a 5th well in our 20-year master plan.
Thank you.
Yep. Good thing is we have the location for it already picked. So.
All right, Paul. Oh,
any other questions? Great.
Jump ahead to page 64 for the Water SDC Fund.
So we completed our well 4 construction and it's been online since February. It's been our lead pump and it's doing great, great investment there. Thank you very much for allocating funds to get that important well drilled ahead of time. And now with the updated or soon to be updated, completed update of the water master plan, again, we're going to be diving into funding strategies, looking at our 10-year CIP, as well as what comes out of that, an SDC rate study. So with that, we have been incrementally, both on the water rate side and the water SDC side, adjusting our rates every year. So hopefully that'll soften the blow of, you know, not having done that. You would have to raise rates for that, you know, 10, 12% we've been raising, you know, 2% a year for the last 5 years all at once, plus what we're going to need for the new capital improvement plan. So that's been our strategy with, as soon as Joe came on board with the finance department, was to just do incremental small increases so you don't have these big walloping increases that really, I mean, affect people a lot more. So
That was the first time that the city had done the incremental pieces.
correct.
Based on 2017. And I haven't heard any comments or complaints from the community about it. So I think it's a really good strategy to offset that huge gap like you had mentioned.
I agree.
Frog in the boiling pot.
Yep.
Hey, Paul, I have one question for you.
Shoot.
Best Western Water Line
Yes.
extension. What's that?
So we had a capital project actually in our last master plan to take a 12-inch water line from Pine Street and connect it with a 12-inch line that goes behind Best Western that actually then goes under the highway in by McDonald's,
Right.
and feeds that west side of town, or one of the feeds to the west side of town. With the industrial park, the new industrial park that went in, we were able to do a cost share with those guys. They put in essentially 2/3 of the cost of that 12-inch line because they needed an 8-inch pipe to satisfy their development. We upsized it to a 12, so we paid basically a third. And we got that line run over to the Best Western property line. And then now we just need to do that intertie between the new 12-inch and the existing 12-inch behind the Best Western.
And Paul, that's to provide kind of circular redundancy around the town?
Provide a lot better fire flows over to the west side, as well as looping the system.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good question.
Great
I
question.
think there was three, we were all gonna ask it, but.
I once do.
Well, when we put that water.
Like,
that
Council
water line-
goal, I don't remember that one, no offense. I mean, that particular, I don't remember that either, so.
Well, when we put that water line in there years ago, it wasn't meant to have all the development out there on the west side.
Correct,
Right?
that's correct.
Yeah, the reason you see the council goal there is just investment in infrastructure.
Sure, yeah.
All right, we can jump ahead to page 68, the sewer fund, unless there's any more water SDC fund questions for Paul.
Does the city test the fire hydrants, or is that the fire department that does that?
The fire department does that with our city engineer, who then takes the actual flow data from that hydrant and puts it into his water model across the entire system. So we can see how the whole system is reacting as well.
Is that done once a year? Or?
So we do it minimal once a year. And then we get, especially with development, additional fire flow testing requests that we do in certain areas of town that are growing.
Thank you.
Well,
All right, 68.
What goes up must go down.
so a couple things to point out here. One that is near and dear to my heart and to Councilor Conley's heart, the Locust Street Sewer Line Relocation Project. One of the scariest projects I've ever done, and one of the most fulfilling to get done that we've done. So that was huge for our department this year. Completing what's soon to be completed solar panel installation at the wastewater treatment plant is so cool. Just to see, that roof that we designed and positioned 10 years ago to have PVs installed on it, now have solar panels going. We tied into the lab last week, and so we're generating power, which is awesome. Something I did mention with the water fund, the council goal was to take a look at our wildfire risk levels with our water and sewer infrastructure. We hired a consultant to do that work. He did a great job looking at all of our wells, our reservoir, the property that we have, and as well as all the buildings in town, and gave us a very detailed mitigation plan that we are beginning to execute right now. So great work was done there.
I had a question about that mitigation plan. It included working possibly with the Forest Service on some burns, and there's a moratorium on burns. What do we know about the moratorium? How long is that going to last? Do we know anything about it?
Nice. Yeah.
I don't want to pretend that I understand anything about the moratorium other than no prescribed burns going forth in this fire season, upcoming fire season.
It's through the entire fire.
I think it was a 90-day.
90 days,
Oh,
by
okay.
then it's too dry to burn, so.
Yeah,
It's essentially the fire season.
So that would have been, would we not burn then as well because of the moratorium, or would we be able to burn
We wouldn't.
our own property?
We wouldn't burn then anyway.
Okay.
We're going to be very, very careful working with partners, in particular the Forest Service, when we do some of these in the future. I think if we do some, it would be, as late as possible in the fall or early winter, probably would be the sweet spot.
So it's not impacting what we had planned to do
Nothing in the short
this
term.
spring?
No.
Yep, we're not ready to burn yet. We still have to do some thinning and ladder fuel mowing work ahead of that. So it didn't affect our plan.
Prescribed burning should be stopped anyhow by the 1st of June in most places. And this year's run a little bit longer than normal in Central Oregon because of the rain.
Right. Thank you.
So this next fiscal year, again, we're going to be finalizing our master plan update, developing the CIP, as well as updating our sewer rates. We do have a project that's been kind of kicked up in the priority list and that's the West Side Pump Station. And that goes right over kind of on Pine Street, right across from Hoyt's Hardware. We'll have a little 50 by 50 piece of property there that we'll have the pump station on. That's where our main trunk line comes in from the west side. So we're going to be diverting the entire west side away from our primary pump station in the southeast corner or northeast corner. And we'll be diverting that across town and tying into the main 12-inch pressure line over on Locust. And so what that does is it frees up capacity not only on the west side, but it frees up capacity on the east side as well, future development. So it's a regional type pump station. It's very expensive. The $200,000 essentially is a 10% design cost for that and the pressure main. So I didn't think I'd actually see that one. We're gonna see it.
How far down the road for construction on that one?
Depending on how quick the Woodlands goes, which the Woodlands made a significant contribution to that project for their impact, it could be next year.
Wow, okay.
And then a council meeting or two ago, you'd mentioned the issues having on the east side on the one neighborhood. And you had said that you would like to see that fixed as well.
It will be a project in our master plan.
Okay, so that's probably still a few years out, maybe.
As soon as we can get it done. So again, we got to get it in the master plan, develop the funding package, and then execute the project. So 1 to 2 years out.
Okay.
I would love to be doing it right now, but we'll take a little bit of time to get the funding together.
Sue looks really interested behind you, by the way.
She should be. We all are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Corey, I need to take off for a half hour or so, I don't know whether you want to recess or.
So we have the URA meeting that starts at 12, so we can't start the URA. We can't recess this one and stop the Zoom and then restart it. So my recommendation would be to elect a vice chair at this point, while Dave is out of the meeting, to continue on with the meeting, or you can recess the meeting completely until tomorrow evening at 5. Those would probably be the two options. Because we could finish this one and open the URA a little bit late. We'd like to do that, and that's why we would like the vice chair. It's up to the board.
I would like to elect Gary Ross as the vice chair to finish out this meeting.
My second.
Motion's been made and second to elect Gary as a vice chair.
All those in favor?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Good luck
Sorry
with your
for my
appointment.
delay.
No, it's okay.
No. Good luck.
Thank you, Chair Moyer.
Here, I'll even give you the gavel. Bang away. Thanks, Dave.
I'll be back. Got the stuff here now.
Okay.
So feel free to run past, the URA is supposed to start at noon. You can
Right.
run past, the URA can start late,
Okay,
as long as it's observed.
and I believe we're down to the sewer SDC funds, is that correct?
Correct.
And that's the last part of this before the URA. Go ahead.
So sewer STC fund, again, just same as the water STC fund. As soon as we get the master plan updated, developing that project list and updating sewer STCs, and then obviously funding strategy for our high priority projects. The design of the west side pump station is what we're going to be looking at with this fund this year. And then next year, there's just going to be, a laundry list. So be prepared. But right now, we're just essentially shoring up our bank accounts to be able to pay for those future projects.
Any questions on the sewer SDC fund? At this time, it appears I need to call a budget hearing. Is that correct? Based on what I have in front of me here. And so I'm going to open a public hearing for state revenue sharing, and the staff report will be by Director O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. So this gives the public the opportunity to comment on any state shared revenues that are received by the city. As you know, those revenues go into general fund and in the street fund separately.
Carrie, do we have anyone wishing to make a comment? All right. And at this time, I will close the public hearing. And we can move on to consideration of a motion related to the budget. So basically, we have 3 motions that are available to us. Move the Budget Committee City Assistant to approve taxes for the 2023 fiscal year at the rate of 2.6417 per 1,000 assessed valuation for the permanent rate tax levy. Or move the Budget Committee City Assistant to approve the budget in, oh, that's the second budget. Okay, so that's just one. Didn't read it carefully. So at this point in time, the motion would be to approve taxes for the 2023 fiscal year at the rate of 2.6417 per 1,000 of assessed valuation for the permanent rate tax levy. Do I have a motion?
I move the Budget Committee of the City of Sisters to approve taxes for the 2022-23 fiscal year at the rate of 2.6417 for $1,000 of assessed value for the permanent rate tax levy.
Do I have a second? Second. It's been moved and seconded. It's been moved and seconded that we approve the Budget Committee. At this time, we have a roll call vote. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries unanimously. Second motion, please.
Second motion.
It's on the, you want to read it again? Sure.
I move the Budget Committee of the City of Sisters approve the budget for the fiscal year 2022-23 in the amount of $24,959,475.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries unanimously. And at this point in time, we recess the meeting. Yes.
You actually don't need to recess the meeting, you can adjourn the meeting.
Oh, we can adjourn.
And I do say May 15th on that, it should be May 25th.
Yes, that's correct. All right, so we can adjourn the meeting at this time. We'll take.
Do you want to clarify on item C there, under consideration of motions, whether you want to reconvene tomorrow evening or not? Do you see that on the agenda?
Yeah.
If you look at the agenda.
Yeah.
I move to cancel the Tuesday, May 15th, 2022
Yeah.
budget meeting.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, moved and seconded to cancel the May 25th, 2022 budget meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. And we are adjourning the general budget meeting.
Take 5 minutes or so?
Yeah, unless you take,
Yes, you can well, we have lunch here for you.
you want to take 15 minutes?
Yeah,
Let's
10,
10 or 15, yeah, just people grab something to eat, yeah.